So I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education for Tuesday, February 28th, 2018. And we will begin by rising to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas noches. Si hay algún miembro del público quien desee aparatos para escuchar interpretación en español, los tenemos disponibles esos aparatos por estas puertas dobles. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And we do have headsets available for the hearing impaired on the side tables, if anyone in the audience would like a headset. So item C5, we will move on to announcement of closed session. There was no action taken in closed session, so we will move forward. We will move to the superintendent's report. Mr. Matsuoka.
Yesterday, it was Monday, the 20 superintendents from the county of Santa Barbara got together for the first time. I think it was pre-Thomas Fire. We didn't realize how disrupted our last couple months were, and it was good to be together. We especially listened to kind of the stories from Superintendent Reyna in Montecito and Superintendent Principal Alzina, who comes from us. And boy, they had a lot to share, and they're still making sense of their future, both in terms of watching the weather like never before. The weather reports have become really important for especially those communities. And then also the financial constraints that they are now facing. Those are some of those cautions of being a community-funded district, and you never know when things can change. Montecito Union and Cold Spring are just facing some really tough financial times. I spoke briefly with both of them. Their need for backup facility it's weekly. Dr. Alzina has a plan for facilities, I think with Goleta Union, but I spoke briefly with Dr. Reyna, and we need to think about how to support them if and when they have to relocate on, honestly, a couple days' notice. But it was good for us to be together as a cohort. We've been through a lot together. The communication was pretty amazing during that time, but we learned a lot. So it's good to be together as a group. And I think our support of our colleagues, are part of our district, will continue into the future. So it's good to see everybody, but we have still work to do. So that's my report.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move forward to item C7, board comments and correspondence. Board members, any comments or correspondence? All right, yes, Ms. Sims-Moten.
I just wanted to say that I had the opportunity to judge some poetry recitals for Black History Month, and this particular poet was Maya Angelou. And so it's wonderful to be able to see some of the works that are not always very present. And we had an array of students from our local high schools, as well as some attendants from the boys' camp, and as well as students from Santa Maria and Lompoc. And I happened to be a judge, and I had this kind of hope and fear that I hope they're going to be really good. And then my fear was that they were going to be really good. And so it was a difficult but actually joyous time to be able to enjoy and see the work that they had put in to memorize the poetry. So I just wanted to echo that. And it is a poetry recital that they do every year during Black History Month, and there's a $1,000 prize that they do. The first prize winner got $500, second place got $300, and third place got $200, and so well deserved for all of them. So just wanted to announce that was a great opportunity to hear some students.
Thank you very much. And I think it's important to note also that Black History Month is really important, but it's important to share that information throughout the whole school year. So it's important to have it highlighted, but I'm sure it would be great if we could have poetry or other materials that might be brought forward from other organizations down the way. So thank you, Ms. Sims-Moten. So moving on to item D, to the consent agenda, and I want to know if there are any items that fellow board members would like to pull. Ms. Parker.
There's nothing that I want to pull, but I want to point out that there is a special retirement that is on the agenda for Dave Hetyoung that's on that. And I was looking at that, and I've spoken to him already, and I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations. It's not happening till the summer, but it is on the agenda tonight.
And I'd like to actually pull item 1 and 2. So I'll have some comments when we get back to that.
All right. So I would just say, yeah, Mr. Hetyoung, what are we going to do? Anyway, you've done a great job, so we'll move forward, but we will acknowledge you again. So we will move on to
Get a vote?
our comments. Public comments, thank you. We'll move on to our public comments. Ms. Sims-Moten.
Yes, we have 2 public comments. Rosanna Zapata. Okay.
Did I skip something?
¿Usted se pone aquí o yo? Ella está conmigo.
Later. Oh, yeah.
Mi nombre es Rosario Zapata y yo estoy representando a 9 padres y mi amiga aquí conmigo porque muchos de ellos están trabajando y no pudieron venir.
I'm Rosario
Zapata.
I'm here representing 9 parents, and my friend is here with me also. And I'm here representing the parents because some of them are working and cannot be here.
La razón que estoy aquí es porque estoy muy preocupada de que ¿por qué los niños están faltando mucho a la escuela?
The reason I'm here is that I'm very concerned, very worried as to why children are missing school or being absent from school a lot.
¿Y por qué estos niños se están cortando? Conozco una historia de una niña que se está cortando.
And why are these children cutting themselves? I know a story about a young girl or a girl who is cutting herself.
Yo entiendo que la educación es difícil para muchos de nuestra comunidad.
I know that education is difficult for a lot of people in our community.
Pero ¿cuál es la razón que las lleva a faltar, a que no quieran ir a la escuela y por qué se están lastimando a ellos mismos?
But what is the reason that leads to them being absent and to be hurting themselves or cutting themselves?
Esto es algo muy serio que queremos que hagan algo ya.
This is something very serious, and we want something to be done about it right away.
Porque siempre nos estamos preocupando por los niños, pero yo nunca había visto o estado en esta situación. Para mí no la conocía.
We're always worried about the children, but this kind of situation, I had not known or seen this type of situation.
Yo estuve desde octubre ahorita atrás de esta situación con esta niña.
I was behind the situation since October. I've been on top of the situation with this girl.
La niña está en junior high. La niña no estaba yendo a la escuela. Se le hizo a su mamá una cita que fuera.
This girl's in junior high. She wasn't attending classes. There was an appointment done for her mom.
Y la mamá me dijo, venga Rosario, me ayuda porque yo no sé mucho de la escuela y usted está muy metida ahí.
And the mom said, Rosario, can you help me? I don't know much about the school, and can you help me? Can you go with me? Because you know a lot about this.
Yo estaba con mis ojos abiertos de muchas cosas que estaban hablándose ahí y no entendía a cuánto la niña no tenía papeles en la escuela, no tenía nada que llevaba en la escuela. No hacía tarea. La niña iba a la escuela sin tareas, sin papeles.
This girl would go to school. She would not take any of her homework. She would not take any kind of papers to work with at school.
Y ¿cuánto tomó para que se dieran cuenta que la niña no hacía todo esto?
And how long did it take for them to notice or to realize that this girl was not doing anything of this.
Es una plática muy larga que yo no puedo durar todo el rato porque tengo 3 meses, 4 meses trabajando en esto. Tuve que...
This is a long talk that I can go on for a long time talking about this because I had been doing this for 3 or 4 months.
Yo tuve que llamar a Safety, tuve que llamar a CAM, esperando que la mamá lo hiciera. Al último, la niña está agarrando ayuda de la escuela porque alguien de mi iglesia hizo carta a la escuela.
I had to call Safety, I had to call CALM, get in touch with Mom. ¿Y qué están haciendo para ello?
Fui a que orar a la iglesia mía.
I went to my church for the members to pray for her.
Y agarraron ayuda, una maestra va a ayudarle a la niña.
They got some help. There's a teacher that's been helping this young girl.
De la iglesia.
From the church.
Y ahorita parece que estamos arreglando todo esto, es como un paso, la ayuda de un lado, de otro, de otro, de otro, de otro.
Right now it seems like we're getting things together. It's like a puzzle, getting help from one place or another.
Ahorita la mamá le tengo que estar preguntando, como estar todos los días preguntándole, ¿hiciste esto? ¿Hiciste esto? ¿Hiciste esto?
Every day I have to be asking the mom, about what's going on. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this other thing?
Si no pregunto, ella no lo hace, pero ahorita ya Cam va a empezar a trabajar con la niña.
If I don't ask about this, mom won't do this. But now Cam is going to start working with this young woman.
Ahora, ¿cuántos niños como esta niña hay en la escuela? Yo no creo que es el único.
30 seconds.
Now, 30 segundos. Now, how many children like this child are there at school? I don't think it's a unique case.
Yo he sabido en el ILAC y en el SAICANSO que muchos de nuestros niños latinos faltan a la escuela. Quiere decir que hay muchos problemas como este.
I found out through ELAC and other sources that many children are absent at school. There has to be many problems such as this one.
Gracias por todo y quiero que por favor consideren lo que estamos haciendo porque es nuestros niños, es nuestra comunidad.
Thank
y es
you.
nuestro mundo.
Thank you for everything. I want you to consider this because it's our children, it's our community, and it's our world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll have Dr. Jennifer Freed and Wendy Friedman.
Hello. Hi, I'm Wendy Friedman, and Jennifer Fried and I started AHA in 1999, right after the Columbine shootings, because we didn't want any teen, any child here in this city to feel so isolated and desperate that they would go to such lengths to cause harm. And again, unfortunately, we're reminded of that and how rampant this problem has become. So at AHA, our mission is to help make schools kinder, more connected, more compassionate places where students do feel safe and do feel connected. We focus on social emotional learning. That's like teaching students and people, teachers alike, teachers and students, how to understand their emotions and how to understand other people's emotions, how to manage their emotions, how to move through conflict in a peaceful way, and most importantly, how to bring students together so that they can feel empowered to support one another.
And the reason we're here again today, we know you, is because we have great news. We just came from a national conference on social emotional learning that the Buffetts put on with the Novo Foundation. And the head of the Yale Institute there, an amazing woman, was confirming that what we're all doing is correct. The sweet spot of best practices is social emotional learning plus cultural responsiveness. And you can't have one without the other. As this parent just pointed out, a girl's harming herself. She needs the emotional connection, not just the equity. There's different levels that we're all addressing. We just wanted to come here tonight and say, you're all doing the job. We're honored to be partners with you. We want to make sure that we keep being the lead in this country of both social emotional learning and cultural responsiveness, and that when a student makes a mistake, as we've all made mistakes, they have a pathway to repair and restore their dignity. All of our children deserve second, third, and fourth chances, and we feel like this district's committed to that, but we want you to know that we're going around the country talking up this district and that we're really grateful to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So moving sort of forward but backwards to the consent agenda, we're going to, do we have a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. So now we are going to have a public hearing. I'm going to close the regular meeting, and I just want to explain.
Probably should
Yes.
wait till 7.
Do you want me to wait?
Yeah. so-
Okay.
Yeah, I recommend that we move into the first action
Action item?
item, and let's get as far as we can, but we should wait until 7 o'clock, because
Okay.
people might plan on being there. Okay.
Great. So moving to the action agenda, item F1, approval of proposal for Parma School demolition plans and specifications. Mr. Hetjunk.
Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka, board members. The Parma site experienced some extensive damage due to a failed water line. Based on that damage and other problems associated with the building not meeting the Field Act and not meeting current accessibility requirements, we're recommending that we demolish this building as it currently stands as a liability to the district. As indicated in the agenda item, our future plans would be to bring forward a proposal and a recommendation that we move the district's food service department to this site. They're currently next door on the second floor in a non-accessible space, and the yard is tight and they need more room. And so the first step is to demolish the building, and subsequent steps are outlined in the background. So.
Ms. Parker?
Well, in many ways, I'm sorry, because it's, driving past it is kind of looking way back in the past. And so I am sorry about that. And in other ways, this is a terrific opportunity. And I think that the idea of moving food services there, I don't know why we didn't think of it in the past, because I guess if you were considering the building that was there, it would be totally inappropriate. But this makes a lot of sense to me. So thank you.
Any other comments, board? All right, so I need action.
I'll move to approve this proposal for the Parma School demolition plans and specifications. The one thing that I would ask is if there are, and I'm sure you would do this anyway, but if there are historical pieces of the building that we can save along the lines of the cornerstones or any plaques or signs, things like that, I hope that the district will do so to honor its significant past.
We'll definitely look at that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So we will move on to item F2, approval of school safety plans, 2017, 2018. Dr. Wagener?
Public comment. Kind of watch the clock. When we get to 7 or ish, if there's a nice transition point, we'll do it.
That's after. Okay. That's after.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Dr. Reed? Dr. Reed and members of the board, Mr. Matsuoka, I bring to you the annual comprehensive school safety plans for 2017-18. Just a review that California Education Code requires each public school to present on an annual basis an updated school site safety plan. These plans are to be approved at the site level by March 1st of each year, and they're forwarded to the governing board for your approval. I want to review, because this question has come up several times, why they are being approved now rather than at the beginning of the year. And the school safety plans actually require the annual comprehensive, I forwarded it on my laptop and not on your screen. They, by law, require that the school look at different points of data, including what they call school crime. So not penal code crime necessarily in the way that we think of that, but suspensions and expulsions and other disciplinary action. They also, most schools look at the California Healthy Kids Survey. They look at the results of other surveys that they have on campus, and then from there come together and develop appropriate strategies and programs to address the goals that are set. And you will see those in the individual safety plans for each campus. Each school utilizes either their school site council or their safety planning committee to complete this process, and then ultimately the school site council approves them. These are done on consultation with law enforcement. Some schools choose to have a member of law enforcement on their actual planning committee. Others create the plan, and prior to being approved by their site council, have law enforcement review them and then sign off. And again, it's the end of February, and they are being brought to you at this point. So the state actually requires a number of components in these safety plans. The schools are provided with a matrix to follow in order to ensure that they've met all the criteria, and you can see those here. I will not read through them for the sake of time, but I know you've seen them in the narrative. I talked about the data already, and what data the schools use in order to set those plans. We had the parent who spoke earlier did speak to attendance, and that is one of the things that we look at. We believe very strongly in our district that attendance is an important piece of data in terms of student safety, because often students who don't feel safe do not come to school, and every student who is truant or chronically absent, they have a story behind that. Well, there are a couple of things that I want to review. Our plans for 2018-19. I want to thank you again for passing or approving the position of the school safety coordinator, which was approved in early January. That's something that we've been working on and looking to do for the past year, because we see the need for really doing a robust evaluation of our practices, and having someone who can provide training and oversight to our schools can keep us up to date in our practices, and so we appreciate that. Part of this is, I think, looking towards next year, and what I want to see different when we bring these to you next year is that you'll see enhanced planning and preparedness from our schools. We are aware that in some areas we are using outmoded means, especially around our drills and our preparedness. Another is communication to our parents about when these drills occur, what they involve, and so forth, because the best way to prevent a problem is to prepare for it. And so we want to do that. I think school safety plan one-pagers for our parents that includes when the drills are being held, inviting parents to be a part of that, and not either as an observer or a participant, which can be helpful. I want to interject at this point. I was at CPAC last week, and a question that came from parents was, are there special plans for students with disabilities? My review showed that a number of our schools did have specific, especially those schools that have students with severe disabilities do have plans, but that just points out one area where I think we can improve and make sure that we're doing that better. And then we'll also, under the leadership of the school safety coordinator, have a district safety committee, a robust committee on that. I think I'd be remiss in not talking about social emotional wellness and the role that that plays. Again, the parent who spoke earlier, and then Jennifer and Randy as well, that physical safety and social emotional learning and wellness have to go hand in hand, and we have to make sure that there's a balance between those two. I think I'll be bringing to you more information about our signs of suicide training that we're doing with 8,500 adolescents between now and the end of the school year. And so we have a lot that's going on, but certainly areas of growth as well. And Mr. Matsuoka asked me if there was a natural stopping point at 7 o'clock. So perhaps we could do questions after the stopping point, or?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wagenet. We will come back to you. You're not finished yet. We will now move to our public hearing, and I'm going to close our regular meeting. Public hearings for this board are a time to listen to the public comment, but we don't discuss the item. The item will be coming up to the action agenda, or any items. Well, this, I'm not sure which one. Oh, yeah, this particular one will be coming up on March 13th, at which point the board will be able to weigh in, but now it is a time for us to listen to the public. So I will go ahead and close the regular meeting for a public hearing. And this is public hearing on real property exchange, the La Cumbre Junior High School portion of site leased for Santa Barbara Fire Station number 5. And we will move forward with public comment.
Madam Chair, I have one request to speak. Lanny Ebenstein.
President Reed, members of the board, Superintendent Matsuoka. My name is Lanny Ebenstein. I'm speaking on behalf of the Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association this evening. We really appreciate the process that the board and the administration are following on this proposal. And I think that some of the concern was that members of the community felt that this was an issue that's an important issue that hadn't received as much community input as it merited. And so we really appreciate and encourage you in the future to take advantage of the public hearing process. This is an important issue in terms of, this is land that has been a part of the Santa Barbara School District. La Cumbre Junior High was acquired almost 100 years ago, so it's not a small issue. And the parcels that both the city and the school district own are not insignificant. As our Taxpayers Association and the Education Committee in particular has considered this issue further, we support the approach outlined by Dr. Matsuoka in his previous memo on this issue as a result of the process that's now being followed. In particular, the board has reached out to Adelante Charter School because we were very concerned, as were others in the community, that the site at Franklin would indefinitely be utilized, those 4 classrooms, for Adelante's 5th and 6th grades in particular, and it didn't seem like that was a good long-term plan. So we really appreciate that the district is now looking at the Adelante issue, and we encourage you to continue to
consider what that community has to say with respect to their long-term housing needs. At the same time, too, we would encourage you that we believe that if you look at all of the factors between the city of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Unified School District together, that the Santa Barbara School District on an ongoing basis through joint use has much more use of its facilities by the city than the city has of the school district, and yet historically the city has only given $20,000 a year for all of that usage. We think that's something that should be looked at again, and we believe that it can be looked at independently of this current issue. And then finally, we do think that with respect to other properties, and I know 30 seconds, with respect to other properties, there is the property adjacent to Peabody School at Cayo Rosales on the Cayo Rosales at the northeastern side of the school. The land actually, it's sort of a reverse situation. The land belongs to the school district. We think that that should be investigated for its return to the school district on similarly advantageous terms. Thank you for your time, and thank you for scheduling the public hearing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move back to Dr. Wagenet.
So I think at this point,
Except I do want to close the public hearing. And now we open the regular meeting. Thank you.
all right. Rather than go more into depth with the presentation, I will turn this over to discussion, and I'm sure that the board has questions.
Yes, actually, I just would sort of like to...
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
There's public comment.
Oh, there's more.
Do that next.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, I have Erica Dixon.
Thank you, Fran. I think you're onto some good things here. I'm here on behalf of Santa Barbara Parents for High School Safety with just a brief update, specifically around safety plans. The feedback I'm getting from this parent group is that although there are site-specific concerns, overall, this parent group is concerned about a district-wide approach to prevention. And Fran, you mentioned social and emotional wellness as an important role for campus safety, and that's where our thinking is going as well, so that everyone's speaking the same language, age-appropriate language from kindergarten through high school graduation. And to avoid a disjointed approach where one school does one thing and then another school does another, and what happens if you go to Washington Elementary and then you go to La Cumbra and they do something different, and then you go to DP and they do something different. And how, when I was looking over the safety plans, I saw a piece of data that, forgive me, I don't recall all the details if it was the San Marcos safety plan, but it cited that in California, 22% of students report themselves to be depressed or hopeless. That's the 22% that puts all students at risk. And I don't say that in judgment of the 22%, I say it in support of the 22%. But when that 22% is attended to in a consistent way from the superintendent to the kindergartner and everyone in between, now we have a safety net and we have a system, and we now can educate our kids, because I can tell you, if you're depressed or hopeless, you're not learning. And if you're scared that someone's going to come onto campus and do harm, you're not learning. So let's help these kids to learn. And the way to do this, we believe, is to look at models that train district-wide and then continue refreshing that training so that everyone's speaking the same language, and we can change that number from 22 to hopefully 2, and we can keep kids safe because they don't get to a hopeless place where violence is their only expression of power. And so that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. Thank you for hearing it.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Ms. Dixon, and also the Santa Barbara Parents for High School Safety, and parents reaching out to the board and sharing their concerns, and we appreciate that. We want to learn more about what your concerns are. We want to understand, and we want to make sure that when we make decisions, that we make them we analyze the facts and all of the information and look at it logically. So we appreciate your voices, and we look forward to you coming on a regular basis to share any new information that you might have. So thank you. Just with that said, I sort of want to go back to one of the key aspects of being on this board is for us to really make sure that we're looking at our safety plans for this discussion specifically, and really looking at them comprehensively. And I understand that this particular, these plans need to be, an action needs to be taken on these plans, but I have some, concerns, for example, with regards to a most recent report that Ms. Capps actually shared with us, the state auditor report that stressed that K-12 schools and institutes of higher education are the second most common location for active shooting incidents. And knowing that, we have this new shooter protocol that is out there, and knowing that and looking at the site plans that are listed, that I saw very little reference to that plan. And I understand also that you stated that these plans were written prior to the incident at San Marcos High School. But I also feel it's really important that we are current and updated on the work, the protocols that we have within this district. So I guess I would like to raise that as a question, because is that something that we can we make changes to our plans that are currently in place?
Well, we could make changes to our plans. Can we train 14,000 students and, and doing that in a meaningful way, and that means training the staff? Can we do that between now and June? That would be a tall order. Can we get that in place for August and the beginning of the new school year, knowing that this is a one-year plan going into next January or February? Absolutely, and that is our plan. So the first, and I actually brought a book here that I've been reviewing, School Crisis Prevention and Intervention. We need to be very systematic about how we do this. And if we do it, we need to do it right, but there's an urgency to it. So there was, going back a bit, there have been a couple years of trying, prior to Mr. Matsuoka being here, there was a desire not to move to a different type of response. But our new cabinet sees that that's the direction we need to go in, and that's what we're doing. That's why we developed the plan this fall, knowing that we needed a person in a coordinator role to be able to do this and monitor it and oversee it, and we're there. So I would ask the board, that would be my question to the board, is knowing that we're hiring this new position and having that be the first priority for that person's role, is that timely enough?
Well, I'll open up to board comments before I make one. Ms. Parker.
Well, I guess this is due at the CDE by March 1st. So I guess that's one question I have. And even if we make suggestions to the safety plans, it's actually the site council, the site council and their school safety committee that have to approve them. So it's not like we can wordsmith this here. And so I feel like maybe we can move forward, maybe even move forward more quickly than what's written in the safety plans, but not expect the safety plans to match perfectly until we see them again, which actually won't be until next January, February, right? I mean, we don't see the safety plans.
I'm sorry, but I realize now, I could have answered this a little differently, and that is, there's nothing in these safety plans that prevents us from moving forward and moving towards best practices. So board policies that are contained in the plans require that we do what we can to evaluate and keep students safe. That's what we'll be doing. So I don't feel like we need to rewrite the plans in order to move forward.
Yeah, so that helps me, and I'll have other things to say as we go forward, but on this particular topic, let's see what other people have to say.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, thank you. I'm finding the sequence of speakers interesting today, just to hear the first parent talking about, her worry for a child who's cutting herself, and then talking about coming from this national conference, and then the fact that we have to review these safety plans on the heels of a very serious threat and a lot of fear that our parents, we still continue to hear from parents about the chat room incident. And so I just, with AHA and what was put into motion after Columbine, and then to just the national landscape of Parkland in Florida, and I know we're all, many of us, myself included, I'm just very focused on this national epidemic of gun violence, and think about it every morning as I walk up the steps to my son's school, which just happens to be the first one, the classroom closest to the street. So we're ahead of the curve, I think, on a lot of things, the emotional well-being and social well-being that programs like AHA and community members but I think that these plans, I think we're not ahead of the curve when it comes to active school shooting. And I think it's time. I mean, this Sandy Hook, we've lost 400 people since Sandy Hook in 200 school shootings. We think we live in this bubble, but there's 1 to 3 active shootings in California at schools every year. We have threats. In Carpinteria, a student was just arrested for making a threat. We have threats on a regular basis. This auditor report that President Reed mentioned is really informative. It came out last summer, and it basically said that California state law doesn't require that school districts have active shooter plans, but they should. And there was actually an assembly bill that made it through, Assembly Bill 58, that required that, but it sort of got lost in the Senate and never was required. So I get it, these things take a lot. It's hard to do a drill, but I think I read in all of the plans, and I think we do have regular fire drills, correct? I think I read that elementary schools, it has to happen quarterly, and then junior high school twice a year, and high school once a year, I believe that's correct. So why not these other kinds of drills, especially as knowledge is changing? I read a few places in the plans that the fire alarm will go off if there's an active shooter. Well, I've been reading a lot in the newspaper about how actually that's the wrong thing to do, because then everybody runs outside, right? So we need to be up to date, and there's such amazing resources out there like Sandy Hook Promise, which will actually come in and train districts, because they understand the burden of trying to train 14,000 students and this many staff. So I just, this auditor report is 23 pages or something. It lays out very clear recommendations of what districts can do. And I think that so all the signs are sort of pointing to what we can be doing and should be doing. And our parents are even started this really active committee with these really very thoughtful and constructive approaches. So I just think we need to be as receptive as possible. And as to the question of these plans, it's hard for me, given the procedural role that we play as a school board, that we have to approve these, but I found them lacking. I found only 6 even mentioned active school shooters, so the vast majority of them didn't. Santa Barbara High School, it was good. They said they were going to put in a strategy for them for an active shooter scenario, but didn't include a strategy. So it seemed very boilerplate by and large, and just now's not the time for boilerplate when our kids are they're on the line of defense. I mean, it's the number, as President Reed said, active shooters choose schools. That's unfortunately what's happening, and it's the #2 location of this epidemic. So I'm not sure how to approach it. I'm looking for some advice. I think that some of our schools, like Cleveland and La Cumbre, actually put a little more specifics when it comes to this area. It looked as though they were borrowing from some templates somewhere, and so I'd like to know if we can provide, even in the short term. I know it doesn't seem feasible before March 1st because it's February 27th, but to provide some sort of, to highlight this as a priority in some fashion. And that's my question to you. My second question is drills. The only evidence of an actual drill that I found in these plans was at La Cuesta. Last year, it happened in April. And so I'd like to know if drills have happened in any of our other campuses, and if not, why not? Thank you.
Okay. I think I'll start with your drill question first. You mean an active shooter drill or okay. So at this point, we have not converted over to, we call them lockdown drills or shelter-in-place drills. All of our schools, and I will get those, I can actually provide the board with the dates, both past and scheduled, of all drills for all schools in the district for this school year. And I think the other piece is...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but those include lockdown drills, or those are just fire?
All drills, every type of drill that each school has held this year.
Great, thank you.
The other piece is, I echo what you're saying about the, and that's, coming out and being transparent that we have much room for growth. As much as we feel like we do a good job of keeping students safe, we know that there are concerns out there that we need to be prepared for. That having been said, these reports are one thing, and they're required by the state. That doesn't prevent us from having schools create plans that meet the current needs. And so that is certainly something that we can bring to the board, and we need to talk about a timeline and specifically what the board would like to see, but we can do that.
Ms. Sims-Moten.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question, so I certainly do echo the comments of my fellow board members. With regards to the safety coordinator, we haven't hired them yet. We just approved that position, right. Correct? So I agree with regards to, because it feels like we're presenting these plans at one point, but hopefully with the safety coordinator, that with the trends that are going on, things that are coming up, that's going to be report how we're going to institute it, obviously, secondly, in a plan, but mostly coming forward with what are we going to do at that point when when that particular incident is coming up, and how we're reacting and being proactive with that. And so hopefully, the comment you said earlier was about making that a priority for this position to focus on when they're hired, in terms of being not only updating, but being current on any incidents that's happening that, they can address at that point. And so will there be a process that when things are coming up to the front, that we're going to have some type of report from this position and or cabinet that how are we addressing it?
I think that that's something that we should work on in preparation for this person coming on, that there's an expectation of reports coming out of that, and that those come up regularly. One thing I did want to mention is that there's actually a school safety and security certification that is done through UCLA Extension. I'm looking into that right now as something that this, again, this is a management position that this person would engage in. But we can, I think, definitely report to the board regularly on the progress of this role. The other thing I want to reiterate is that we're looking for someone to fill this role who is coming out of law enforcement or a public safety role, a firefighter, probably not an educator. And because we know that that's who we need. We need someone who can make those connections with other folks in public safety and who brings that lens. We're pretty fortunate to have the relationship we have with law enforcement and public safety in the Sheriff's Department, Fire Department, Police Department. I know Ms. Carey and I were talking about the active shooter. They used Dos Pueblos summer before last as for their own active shooter training and gave her an analysis of that. And so, yes, while we don't hold active shooter drills, we have worked with law enforcement on that. We did, after Sandy Hook, the Santa Barbara Police Department went into each of our schools and looked for physical deficiencies or problems. And so there are things that we've done and put in place in response to that. And I think having a person who comes from that industry sector is really going to help our process.
And I would just add one more comment. So I do, expect that this is going to be a lot for that one person. So I would hope that as we begin to make sure we have support in place for them to be able to do that. And I also don't want to minimize the importance of establishing relationships with our students and with our schools, so it becomes institutionalized. And it's not just about reports and reporting, but how do we then institutionalize? We want safety. How in educating our workforce as well as our students be a part of that position as well.
Absolutely. So communicating out to parents, working with staff. I imagine this person being on campuses during drills, observing them, meeting with administrators and site safety teams to give feedback. Yes, this is someone who's interfacing a lot and out in the field a lot at our schools. I do want to say that, I think you all know that a lot of my work, my passion has been the social emotional. We're still moving forward with that. This will be happening. I'll be working closely with this person who will be part of student services. And so the social emotional and the physical safety will be happening parallel but often intersecting.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to, first of all, I appreciate your listening to what we're discussing and really saying that, I think in response to Ms. Kapp's comment with regards to these sort of boilerplate site plans, that maybe, and what Ms. Parker also said, that maybe we can't change the actual plan that is in place currently on these site plans. However, we can make changes in terms of how we focus on school safety going forward. I also appreciate the parent speaking, Ms. Erica Dixon, about the comprehensive approach to really looking at this, not just secondary schools, not just San Marcos, but all secondary schools, all elementary schools, really looking at what is going on and what language would be going on with regards to teaching the students in elementary level, and then the teachers, obviously. But I think also in terms of comprehensive, again, the comprehensive approach to how do you do this, and really including, like you mentioned, law enforcement, mental health, students, teachers, parents. I think students should be involved in this process. So I just think it needs to have input from a lot of constituents to really make sure that we have a plan that everyone is well-informed, and also that we're doing the best to make sure our students are safe.
I'd like to say, I think, I anticipate that going into next year is, and actually it could start this year, is many times principals have to, shake the bushes to find parents to participate in safety committees. And hopefully we'll have many parents wanting to be a part of that, as well as the district safety committee. I mentioned the school crisis prevention and intervention. It's the PREPARE model. Dr. Shane Jimerson, who's actually a parent in our district, is one of the authors of this model, the PREPARE model. It covers everything that we're talking about here, and he and I actually met last week to talk about what it would mean for our district to ramp up and do a trainer of trainer models. And so that's something that I'll be reporting back to Mr. Matsuoka, and I can also report to the board on whether we think that's the way to go in terms of getting a real comprehensive, thorough model in place. And this is This model is endorsed by the National Association of School Psychologists, and it addresses, from what I can tell, every piece of what the board and parents have been concerned about.
Yeah, Ms. Parker.
Well, I'm going to move off to other questions about the site plan, so if you want to finish up on this, you're welcome to go ahead. Another aspects of the site plans, the safety plans. Are we ready to do that, or did you want to add more?
I'm still on the safety plans.
I'm still on the safety plans too, but different aspects of it.
Go for it.
All right. So 2 things. One is that in the context of this conversation, though, I want to be careful. One of the trainings that I went to a number of years ago was was by an ex-FBI agent, expert in violence on campuses. And it's very typical that we think of a student or an ex-student as the shooter, and that is not always the case. And also there's deep concern nationally about terrorism and terrorists coming to schools that aren't from the community but know what kind of havoc that would wreak, as that's happened in other countries. And one of his points was that when you put details on websites like campus maps and what you do in a lockdown procedure or what you do when a shooter is coming on campus, and if you put bell schedules, and parents want these things and students want these things, and I understand, but it's actually, I think, quite important that our school, especially these school safety plans, go to a certain level of detail and then stop. Because I don't want anybody from the outside to be able to go to this, to search our website, school safety plans, and to have 23 of them here for you to look at. And so where you hear, this is what happens when in this situation, and this is what we're doing. Here's the campus map, because some of them had a campus map on it. They can go to the regular websites, and some of our schools put those on their regular websites, and honestly, they shouldn't. But I want us to be wary of that. And then super practically, first of all, thank you for the special ed comment that you made, that most of these do not address some of the unique needs that special education students might have. And I think you're right, it's really important that we bring these into the safety plans. Goleta Valley Junior High, and I don't know if this is for Ms. Carey or Mr. Hetjunk, they specifically said that they do not have an intercom. And so I don't know if there's somebody, then they were going to fundraise to get an intercom. And I would appreciate knowing what's going on with that.
So, is this on?
No.
I'll go to the phone.
We should throw it away. Gotta do it.
So, Mr. Matsuoka and I just actually discussed this today. I had done several years ago a lot of research about an intercom system, not just for Goleta Valley, but for DP, which are 2 schools that don't have functioning intercom systems. At the time, there wasn't bond money for them, but we think that we've found some money that we can move forward in doing intercom and PA systems at both of those sites.
Thank you. I knew that Dos Pueblos did not have one at one point, but I thought that had been put in place.
No, neither of those schools have functioning intercom systems. They all have phones on the desks. Those phones are all capable of doing announcements, but two-way communications to the office are not possible at those schools.
So I asked Mr. Rickman to get a proposal from the company, and in the bond program, we have a technology infrastructure budget that will be able to handle that.
Okay, good, because I don't think it's acceptable that 2 of our schools don't have functioning intercoms, and that one would think that they needed to fundraise for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We will take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm glad that Ms. Capps. Yeah, Ms. Parker raised a really good point, and I think that in terms of communication, because Dr. Wagner had said, potentially a one-pager to these plans would be really helpful, and I wholeheartedly agree. As a parent, I just don't want these plans, and I'm sort of looking at our assistant superintendents who are in direct contact with principals. I just don't want these plans to be yet another thing that we have to do for California law, and I get it, but even the fact that we're talking about it on February 27th, puts us in a box. I don't have any opportunity to say, I'd like to to see some strengthening of the active shooter plans. I mean, so I just don't want there to be, I know there's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to being part of a school district, but when it comes to safety, I don't want to sort of see this cut and pasting kind of plans and links to things that link you back to the original document. Honestly, I found that several times. It links to our district site saying that the district, the superintendent will work with each site to create a plan. I mean, it's literally passing the buck on a few different areas. But I get on the one hand, you don't want it to be, detailed for somebody who's sinister and evil. But I also know that there's been so much research in this arena that, unfortunately, because of the tragedies that we've suffered through as a nation, that there must be an answer to a exemplary plan, right? That is concise, that a parent could understand, that you read it and you feel like, okay, I'm putting my hands in my children's safety in good hands. So it's a big challenge, but I don't feel comfortable as is sort of just rubber stamping these plans. But yet, California state law says that we need to by Thursday.
Well, this is interesting because it actually says that the school site council has to, and I looked at this through different eyes just this week. It says that the school site council has to approve them and forwarded by March 1st and forward them to the board for approval.
So it does mean that we have to approve them by March 1st.
Right.
So we have time to, I know it's for action today, but given the discussion, do we have time to maybe move it to the next board meeting?
I'm not sure how this helps if the sites have to have them approved by Thursday.
Right.
But
the sites have to approve it. But I think I go back to what I said before, which is if the board, and I agree, the plans had to be done. Most of them were done in January. We knew we were bringing this new position in. But that does not prevent us from making improvements and presenting the board with better plans, more meaningful plans at a time to be determined. We wouldn't get a good product if by the next board meeting I brought you a new set of plans. But what is a time frame that we can put together to bring the board a new set of plans that are more of a reflection of something that's meaningful?
Ms. Sims-Moton.
So the deadline with regards to the school site plans have been met, right? So we've met that, so that's not an issue anymore. It's now to the board, and now that the comments in a time frame to bring it back to us with a more meaningful plan, we can do that, right? So we're not out of compliance because the board, the site plans did come to us by March 1st. If we don't approve them tonight, we're not out of compliance.
Ms. Parker?
I would just say, though, that that's true. We could reconsider them, but anything that is reconsidered must be approved by the school. And so it's asking a lot of staff to make some significant, meaningful change and then have their safety committee and their site council meet before March 13th. And so I'm not sure if that's practical. I don't know if, we could put it off and vote on March 13th, but I don't know that it makes any difference.
Well, my comment is that, first of all, we're not out of compliance, so they're here by this. March 13th was just something I threw out because I thought we had to have it here, but we could actually extend that date so that gives them time to prepare more meaningful plans to come back to us for approval, whatever that date is we decide, or makes sense to the school sites.
Yeah, what is our deadline?
Well, I think at this point, it's the deadline that you all
come up with.
But I do want to say that at this point in the year, this is March, what will we be asking schools to do, to take and put aside in order to do this?
So I have one question. So one idea would be potentially to, because I do feel it's really up to, first of all, I defer to all of you who have the knowledge and the cabinet and Mr. Matsuoka in terms of really looking at this in a comprehensive way. I don't think it should just be piecemeal put together. I think it should be a comprehensive plan. And so a plan that is going to be sustainable and meaningful and not a rush job. So one thing that I might put forward would be perhaps there is an opportunity for you to provide after you've, and I would defer to you as to when you think you might have this idea, that you could give us some sort of comprehensive plan in terms of how you might refine the site, the site maps here and the work that you're doing, but also perhaps a plan that would just sort of map out how this might be done in a comprehensive way in terms of including parent bodies, teachers, students, some sort of plan in such way.
Let me step in here.
Yeah.
So, not part of, what we tackle every week is the priorities of the work of the district and our schools. I just counted. We have 13 more weeks in the school year. We have about maybe 2 or 3 more cycles of school site council meetings. And there's a big task on the plate of the principals, is their SPSAs about instruction, about their instructional goals, which they have to work hard to get done, and that has to go before their school site councils. So I know you know this, but I have to say that for our teachers, for our principals, for our schools, and even, I think we have 6 more board meetings the rest of the school year. So while it's February, we're turning the corner into spring. And so the workload on our staff is, they've got a full plate. I hear the board about, when you can tell when there's a boilerplate report. Like, I've read hundreds of them in my career. So we will do better, but we need to do this in a time and space where people can give some thoughtful attention to it. And I'll tell you who we need to really loop in is our law enforcement experts, because we run schools, but we really need to listen to law enforcement about, okay, so what are the best practices that are emerging in the field? And it has been a slow evolution, but it is changing, and I think, unfortunately, our country's learning. So I want to find the right law enforcement people who can not just read a plan and say, okay, it's okay, but to actually help us design those plans. And I have to agree with Ms. Parker, this tension of having the plans but not being so public about it that somebody could just download it. That's a tricky space. And I go back to this idea of commander's intent. Like, how do we get a plan that our teachers and our students could execute in maybe a crazy environment where people are thinking on their feet? And so I know we need to get some plans and some structures, but I'm interested in what our law enforcement experts would say about what do you do in an elementary school? How do you handle a lunchtime moment? All those scenarios because these moments don't come when you plan them, when you drill them. We've got to anticipate all these awkward moments. So I'm just interjecting here. We have 13 more weeks in the school year. So.
Thank you.
Ms. Capps.
I think that there's a step in between. I think that for the schools that didn't even include any reference to lockdown and active shooter scenario, they could potentially be provided with a template that we to draw attention to the principal and to the site council and to the safety committee that this was an omission and needs to be added. At least that would prioritize it and draw some attention. And we have some other examples. La Cumbre, as I mentioned, La Cumbre and Cleveland had this, and La Cuesta, I believe, had exact similar language. I'm not sure where that language came from. If you agree with the language, and if law enforcement agrees with the language, it seemed a bit outmoded to my untrained eye, but perhaps that template could be, again, if appropriate, provided to them, and those 14 plans, or 13 maybe, are added to in a timely manner.
Did you say
Because I checked yesterday, and there were 2 schools that didn't have reference to lockdown or shelter in place, so.
Only 6 had reference to active shooter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's also the language that is used, but we could change that to active shooter.
Yeah.
There's also, and I know we're really looking at time-wise and what we can do, but there's also research, and that's the thing I like about the prepare model that we're investigating is this is research-based. This is coming out of 25-plus years of best practices, but that talking about an active shooter to a first grader instead of a shelter in place and those sorts of things, and so it's the semantics as well.
Sure.
But we really do want to go to the experts and do this right. But I think we definitely can do what you're talking about, which is I want you to update your plan with this model in place, and I know the La Cuesta model because I used to write that plan, and there are definitely those things that we can do, put that in place for the remainder of this school year.
Thank you.
Begin working so that, I keep pointing to this, there's not a decision been made, but my commitment is that when we roll out 2018-19, that you're going to see an entirely different sort of way of approaching school safety in terms of especially the physical safety piece.
Great.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Harding actually had the wording, run, hide, fight. So it can be put into place in the elementaries in the way that they did it. I thought that was acknowledged. Any other comments, Ms. Parker?
And I just have a question, because it's always been the practice here for the safety plans to come to the school board. Ed Code actually says each school shall forward its comprehensive school safety plan to the school district or county Office of Education for approval. And so I don't know if it's a California-wide practice for school boards to approve these as opposed to district administration, but that's just a question that I have for the future.
So any other comments? Yes, Ms. Capps.
I will just add as a positive note that the auditor's report did outline that many schools don't even complete these plans, and that meant a lot of effort is spent just trying to get schools to do their plans. So, I mean, the fact is, it should be stated that all of our schools were in on time with plans, and so I'm not wholly critical of the plans, and I just wanted to at least point out that we're all in compliance, and we're sitting here because they did meet their deadline.
Yes, and I just wanted to acknowledge Dr. Wagon. I know you've had a lot on your plate, to say the least, so you've had to handle a lot of different issues, so I appreciate your report, and also your acknowledgement of wanting to, even though we have these site plans, but with Ms. Capps' recommendation that we have the language tweaked, for a better word, to include shooter protocol language or run, hide, fight type language. And that we also will look forward to, as you have the opportunity to meet with Cabinet and come together to come up with a comprehensive plan that would be inclusive and really appropriate for moving forward in this type of day and age that we're in, to be prepared and keep our kids safe.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. You absolutely have my commitment and the commitment of Cabinet to do that. Thank you.
So it's an action item.
So, yes, I know, I'm coming back to the action. Do know that. So we are here for the approval of the school safety plans for 2017-18. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second?
I just had a question on that. Do we have to add that approval plan with the direction to staff to make the change? Is that needs to be part of the motion or not? It doesn't have to be? Okay, just want to make sure it's on the record.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable with voting for the motion if it included language for an amendment.
Right.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
So are you seconding it?
Yes, with the amendment language.
With the amendment?
Yes.
Perfect.
Great.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right.
Before we move on, I would share one comment relevant to this topic. We have a cabinet member with 20 years of police reserve experience, and that is Mr. Rickman. And he has weighed in whenever we come up about something related to law enforcement, school safety, and, I mean, he's a trained officer. So that's really, it's important for us to know that. I think the board maybe knew that, but I'd like our community to know that we have someone who occasionally has to do reserve police duty. In fact, he had to do a lot of reserve police duty back in December and January. So we appreciate having Mr. Rickman's experience and perspective among us.
Thank you. So we will now move on to item F3, recommendation for approval of a one-year contract with Colby Technologies Accountability Software Services Agreement. Ms. Jate.
Thank you, board members. Good evening. So tonight I'm here to present, staff has been looking around for a software that will help us manage our bond program. Currently, we're managing $70 million, and of course, the total bond project is $193 million. And we've been keeping track on spreadsheets and then going into our financial system, and we just felt that it was time to have a more sophisticated software and to try to eliminate any possible linking errors or formula errors. We will still need to track it in Colby and then put the actual entries into Munis. That won't be, they don't talk to each other, which is fine. Then we have a check and balance. I feel that we have a reconciliation to do on a monthly basis. But also we have a consultant currently that helps us with our reporting to the state. And there's really no need to continue that because the software also produces all the reports that we need to upload to the state. So I'm asking, so it's basically, it's cash-wise, it's a moot point, and after the first year with the implementation, it's a savings to the bond program of about $40,000. Also, when the bonds run out and if we don't have any more bonds or we're not happy with this service, we can, I'm asking to also pay $5,000 to have all the data kept into Colby. We will have access to the Colby technologies forever and ever and ever, which is really important. And then we can't add any more projects to the bond software, but we can always view it. And that's really important when you terminate either a program or a software, that you have access to the data in that format. And so you can view it, but you just can't add any more projects to it. So I'm asking for your approval of this action item to the one-year contract for Colby Technologies.
Any board comments, questions?
Funded out of the bond funds, sorry.
Okay. All right, well, do we have a motion?
So moved and glad to see that.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So moving on to item F4, reduction in particular kinds of services, Mr. Matsuoka.
So every year, we always have to look at some of the spots where we need to reduce staffing. We have just some really small spots in our district. The spots are related to our, if Mr. Rouse will scroll down to remind me, in our child development services, that's our biggest location. A lot of it is just reducing by like 0.5625. It's a fraction of an hour that we're reducing. It's because there's no kids there from 5 to 5:30 or something, so it's a practical savings issue. The expanded learning, that is a result of the OAS closure because there was someone in that longer day, And that's the only school that had that kind of position. So he does have a job, the person has a job, but it's got to fit into all of our other structures. And then we have one school counselor that's back in our big high schools. We looked at our staffing across all three, and we've actually equalized it at, I believe it's, Ms. Carey, 6 guidance counselors per comprehensive high school. So we were overstaffed. We were at 18.6, so we're just dropping it by 0.6. So that's a quick summary. If you have any questions.
I just asked, is there any impact on services to students? So how do you know?
No, minimal.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Moving on to item F5, approval of agreement for special services with School Services of California, Inc. Mr. Matsuoka.
We recognize with the change in leadership that's coming for Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and since I've been running the team now for a couple months, I see our strengths and our challenges, and I think it would be really helpful for our district and for the next Assistant Sup of HR to really have an assessment of our HR systems. And School Services, they do this kind of analysis for districts all the time. They're excellent at it. It's not that much money when you think about this division keeps track of 2,000 employees in our district. I mean, I think it's money well spent. So they would get on the ground soon, do an assessment. We'd have the report back probably about May, definitely by June.
Ms. Parker.
I think that this is a great idea and super timely, and I'm glad that we're getting ahead of it.
Ms. Capps.
I agree with that. I did want to flag the timing. I've been part of organizations where this has been done prior to someone new coming in, and then that person doesn't necessarily have ownership. I'm sure you thought that through, and so just flagging the timing. But certainly I'm supportive of the effort.
All right. So can a motion here?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Moving forward to item F6, approval of National University Internship Credential Program Agreement. Mr. Matsuoka.
This is one of our many, whether it's annual or every 2 years or every 3 years, renewal of agreements with universities who provide credentialing services to our teachers. And if you have any further details, I'll bring up Ms. Peak.
All right. We have action on this item.
I'll move approval of the National University Internship Credential Program Agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Moving on to item F7, ratification of 2017-2018 Santa Barbara Unified School District and Santa Barbara Teachers Association agreements. Mr. Matsuoka.
So we have been holding negotiation sessions with SBTA probably since November. We have tackled a lot of language, and so it's really a collection of, different parts of the contract that they had concerns with, that we had concerns with. And so this is a list of all the tentative agreements that we have reached over the last 3 months. You'll see in the last items in the board agenda are the sunshining for the next stage of negotiation around mostly salary and compensation. So this is approving all of the contracted tentative agreements that we've reached with SBTA.
Ms. Parker?
I'll note the very minor typo that it said Special Education Department Chair instead of Cherry.
That might have been part of the negotiation.
It could have been part of the negotiations. Maybe it's the new title, right? But other than that, I don't have any questions on it, and pleased that we can move forward with and move to ratify this 2017-18 Santa Barbara Unified School District and SBTA agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. All right, so it is customary for the board to take a 5-minute break prior to our report and discussion agenda, so we will break now. All right, we are now in the report discussion agenda, and we are going to start with item G1, Youth and Family Services presentation. Valerie Cassell, Executive Director, Megan Rourke, Associate Executive Director, and Yoni Harris, and Chair, Board of Managers. Did I say everything right? Let's see. Yoni Harris is the Chair and Board of Managers.
I'm Chair of Board of Managers.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
No, it's a report.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and as your chair just said, my name is Yoni Harris. I'm chair of our Board of Managers of the Youth and Family Services, which is the social services branch of the Channel Islands YMCA. It's an unusual branch. And before I introduce Valerie Kissel, our executive director, I'd just like to thank you all for doing what you do. We are at YFS concerned with providing services and resources for some of our most vulnerable youth in our community. And I know that, of course, you as volunteers on the Board of Education are concerned with the youth of our community. So we have a lot of overlapping interests, and I also know what it's like to be a volunteer. So thank you for the effort and time you put in to making this a better community for our young people. So now I'd like to introduce Valerie Kissel, Executive Director of Youth and Family Services.
Thank you, Yoni. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining the overview of our services and our agency. As Yoni mentioned, we're one of 7 branches of the Channel Islands YMCA. And I think everybody's familiar with the YMCA, and I jokingly refer to ours as the branch that doesn't have the pool or the gym. We are part of the association that houses the Santa Barbara Y, if you're familiar with that, the Montecito Y. We also have services in Lompoc, Camarillo, and Santa Ynez. Ventura. I almost forgot Ventura. But we are an independent social services branch of the Y, and here in the state of California there are only 2 associations of the Y that have social services, San Diego and here us in the Channel Islands. We are independent. We don't get any of our funding through memberships. Our funding all comes from individual donors, foundations, and government grants. We don't charge for any of our services. And I want to tell you briefly how Youth and Family Services came about. Back in 2001, there was a youth shelter known as Noah's Anchorage. Here, I see a lot of heads. Yeah, Noah's Anchorage has been around for over 46 years. Well, what happened, they were seeking an organization that could provide the infrastructure to keep Noah's Anchorage viable. So the Channel Islands YMCA stepped up to the plate, and Youth and Family Services was born. We have 4 core programs at Youth and Family Services, and my associate Megan's going to talk in more detail about Noah's, but I want to tell you about the other 3 just briefly. We also provide an after-school enrichment and alternative programs out in Goleta. That's the St. George Youth Center. It was previously known as the Isla Vista Teen Center, and it is now known as the St. George Youth Center. And that program over there is for 5th graders through 12th grade, where they can come after school. There's leadership programs and all kinds of enrichment and activities for kids after school. The other program that I want to tell you about is for a little bit older population, and that's called My Home, not mine personally, but My Home. And it is a collaborative with the Santa Barbara Housing Authority, where we have transitional age housing apartments available for young adults aged 17 through 24 that are very vulnerable and at risk for homelessness. We work specifically with kids that are aging out of the foster care system. Right now, we currently have 17 young adults on a waiting list that are not housed. So that's one of the programs that we also provide, and that's basically case management and working with young adults on life skills, because there's not a lot of 18-year-olds out there that really know how to navigate adulthood and living on their own. Our case managers, they help them with applying for school and also applying for jobs, writing resumes, and things of that nature. We also have a street outreach program, which is part of our Noah's Anchorage, and I think that Megan is going to explain a little bit more about that program. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Megan Rourke, who is the Associate Executive Director for Youth and Family Services.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, everyone, for the time to speak this evening. I began working at Youth and Family Services as a residential counselor about 10 years ago at Noah's Anchorage. And since then, I've filled many different positions and met a lot of different youth and families and been able to do things like this, which is great. So from 1972 through 2017, Noah's Anchorage has provided a safe haven for approximately 9,000 youth. Noah's Anchorage has 8 beds for 10 through 17-year-old boys and girls, as well as 24-hour drop-in services and a 24-hour telephone crisis line. In a single year, we meet 200 unduplicated foster, runaway, homeless, throwaway, and other youth experiencing crisis that are seeking support and safety during times of need. Of those 200 youth, approximately 80 young people end up staying overnight because they need a safe bed, a warm bed, a place where a place where trained staff are there equipped to help them through the crisis and work with their family. So at Noah's Anchorage, we provide counseling, case management, referrals, hot meals, like I mentioned, a warm bed, and connections with nurturing and professional adults. In our street outreach program that Valerie mentioned, we work with youth and young adults. Average age is about 16 through 24, and that program has kind of 2 main components. The first is we operate a 7-day-a-week drop-in center from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. out of the garage at Noah's Anchorage, and that drop-in center is really focused on meeting youth wherever they're at. Many are living on the streets, many are couch surfing, many are traveling through and run away from faraway places. And so we're working with those folks in our drop-in center to provide safety, referral, basic needs, referral to other adult homeless shelters if that's something that they're interested in getting off the streets, and as well as just building their community. The second component of that outreach program is actual street-based community outreach. And so each afternoon, 7 days a week, our street outreach staff are going out in pairs and meeting youth and young adults on the streets that are at risk, in homeless camps, hanging out at train stations, and we're building rapport on their turf. And that really helps to encourage them to then come back to the drop-in center, engage in healthy relationships. So I want to just briefly share a story of an experience I had with a 14-year-old boy named Michael recently. So a few months ago, in the living room at Noah's Anchorage, and if anyone's ever been there, it doesn't look like a facility, it's quite homey. I was working on a puzzle with a 14-year-old boy. I hadn't seen Michael in about 6 months. I first met him in 2015 when he and his siblings and his mom were all living in their car together. They were attending school locally, and their mom was struggling to find permanent housing and a job to support her family. Over an 18-month period, the boys stayed overnight at Noah's Anchorage. Periodically, they received individual and family counseling, and mom received intensive case management services from our staff. When the boys were sleeping in their car, as a family, they would come to Noah's for a shower, for breakfast, to store their lacrosse gear so they didn't have to store it in the car and then have to find the car after school before practice. So we were kind of turned into a bit of a temporary home base while they were without one. The family has and continues to celebrate holidays and birthdays at Noah's, and I'm happy to say that recently Michael told me his family is still living together in their in their 2-bedroom apartment, and he's now a high schooler, and he still likes lacrosse, but he's way more into football, and he still loves math. So it's an ongoing relationship with the family, and I am I'm encouraged to see that they are coming back to share successes outside of time of crisis. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak, and I'm not sure if Valerie had some closing statements.
Thank you very much for your attention this evening. The reason that we're here is just because we want you to know about the services that we provide. And one of the things that we do find that is definitely increasing is that we have a voluntary service where if you're in a situation at your home where there could potentially be violence, a youth can come to NOAA's and stay for a cool-off period. And during that time, the youth and the family go through intensive counseling sessions. And frequently, we do have law enforcement that will bring us youth, with the approval of the parent, and that's the last step before they actually go into the system. So we just want to spread the word that we're out there providing services to, these students that we all share. And thank you very much for your time. If there's any questions.
Any questions? All right, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for the story. I think you really bring us in when you can share stories of experiences, and it was really a wonderful, poignant story, and thank you. So we're actually going to jumble the order a little bit so that we can move up to an update of the framework of student safety. With Mr. Matsuoka, we have some guests here to share with us, and so we want to make sure that we can bring them forward and not have to sit through our LCAP plan necessarily.
As riveting as it will be. So I wanted to provide an update to the board about our work around school climate and safety, and we've now added the word climate because it's the environment in which our kids go to school at is the climate, and we want it to be safe, but we also want it to be a place that kids identify with their school and their community. So Jared and Cindy and I met, I can't remember, last week, kind of to debrief the last couple weeks, but also to really listen to them about what do they feel like are next steps. And so one of the important things, there's ongoing requests to train our staff to interact with our students about all kinds of topics around safety. But we feel it's really important to assess from our teachers, we have 800 teachers, what do they feel like they need at this point in time? Because we could design all kinds of supports and delivery models, but if it's not a felt need by our staff, if I force them to come, that's not going to be good. And if we invite them to come, we need to hit the needs that they feel like they have as they navigate these times about safety. And so that was one of the things we came up with at our last meeting. And then what we see emerging, I went to the parent evening that they hosted a week ago on Tuesday. And there is a need for a task force. There's a need for a body of leaders from, honestly, a lot of domains. This is not just safety. It is mental health. It's campus safety. It's all the safety plans that we just spent time on. It's law enforcement. It's all kinds of interrelated pieces. And so I actually have a diagram on my phone of a diagram that actually Dr. Reed and I co-constructed sometime last week. We just kind of brainstormed about what are all the dimensions of this, and so we're going to put that to paper and actually present a model and a plan for this task force. So I just wanted the whole board to know that that is in motion, and you'll hear that report on March 13th. But I thought it would be good for us to hear from our colleagues who are on the ground and also out in the community, Jared Schwartz and Cindy Silverman. So let's invite them up, and they'll share their read on the community and also on our campuses. So welcome.
Thank you, Superintendent Matsuoka. Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you to the board. We're happy to be here. been an interesting time. We had an opportunity to meet with the teachers, Jared and my education director, Brianna Moffett. Met with them at lunchtime, had an opportunity to give them information about how to have a conversation in the classroom. We're finding there's a wide range of reactions still. The seniors are mad at the freshmen because they feel like they're now having to do all these different projects that they might not have had to do before. So we didn't want to go in and just across the board train all of the teachers. We wanted to have an opportunity to do a survey. So Brianna and Jared are putting together a very simple 5-question survey that will assess what's happening and what the reaction is of the teachers and what are their needs. So some of the things we presented, empowering young people in the aftermath of hate. There are some great activities in here that we gave to the teachers to go back to the classroom. I think Jared will talk a little bit about the reaction of a couple of the teachers after that session. Then we did have a parent meeting. There were only about 30 parents that showed up, so I think that things are quieting down. And parents were really engaged. They're interested in a task force. They're interested in being involved. They want to be part of the solution. So we're looking at ways that they can be involved and part of the solution. And Brianna's also been working behind the scenes a little bit to talk about what kinds of restorative justice things we can do with the students who are involved. So there's a lot of things happening on many different levels. It's been a pleasure to work with the superintendent. I think he has some good ideas about how to move forward. I do think, as Kate Parker mentioned last time, it needs to be done across the district, not just at San Marcos, but we want to make sure that we do the right thing across the district, and we're not giving too much information, and we're giving the teachers exactly what they want and the tools that they need. So thank you for the time. We really are happy that we're able to help the district in this way.
Yeah, just to share a little bit more about the meeting with the faculty as well as the parents. As Cindy said, we met with the faculty on February 14th. Actually, we had a lunchtime meeting and an after-school meeting. It was actually the two of our organizations and CALM as well to provide resources about how to deal with hate, how to deal with misogyny and sexism, and CALM was able to add information about how you support your children through the students through trauma. And I think it's also important to say that these meetings came really after some preliminary meetings that were held by AHA, What is Love, and the Mental Wellness Coalition, who were in there immediately after the incident happened, and then we were able to follow up a week or two later. We passed out a number of resources to the teachers who came, and then Principal Barron's emailed those resources to all teachers, all faculty, and staff at the school, and we brought copies of that for you as well tonight. One of the things we heard from two teachers afterwards, one that afternoon, and I'd say it was interesting that we had this lunch meeting, and then in between the lunch meeting with the faculty and the afternoon after-school meeting with the faculty was when everyone got the news about Parkland, Florida, and so kind of things were heightened right after that. But we heard from one teacher that afternoon who said that immediately after the lunch meeting, he went back and worked with his class about talking about issues of masculinity and violence. He said the class had a fantastic discussion about these issues, were very engaged, and really wanted to be talking about these issues. Another teacher the next day told us that she did the same thing with her English classes, and I brought a message that she sent to us just to give you a sense of what she shared. And she wrote, "We had a great discussion in both of my English classes. One student linked emasculated, and that's the term that she used, males, to overcompensation, to gun violence. We circled back to what had happened here at school, and we talked about how we are not powerless in this. We can start with our joking, as well as our own assumptions as to gender roles, and how we treat people who don't fit them. Before I knew it, class was almost over. More than anything, I'm afraid my students would be afraid of thinking there's nothing we can do. I see and hear a lot of hopelessness these days." So for her, she really felt that the resources were very empowering to her as a teacher, and that the discussion was very empowering to her students. And I think, the more we can get these resources out there, we certainly invite you to share them with the entire district, with anyone who needs them, and they're appropriate for a variety of different age levels. And both our organizations are available to help educators really talk through and think through how they might use them. The meeting with the parents also went well, and again, like Cindy said, the parents really do seem to want to be engaged and move towards solutions around safety, around communication, and other issues as well. So we really thank you for engaging us and other organizations in the community around getting involved with these issues, and we're here if there's any questions or additional needs.
Any questions, or? I just want to thank both of you for stepping up and really quickly coming together and collaborating to support our district. And they're also appreciating the collaboration with AHA and What is Love. I mean, to bring all of these organizations together with your expertise is amazing, and I think it's really great to have you all to turn to. So thank you for the work you're doing, because truly the education for our teachers is going to support our students and ensure that that dialogue, which I know both of your organizations provide, those opportunities. So thank you.
Do you have a question? I have a question. Thank you to either one of you. It's wonderful that you're doing this, and I'm hoping that it's clear to you both as organizations, sort of roles and different partners, because there's many, which is a good thing. It's a good problem to have. But as a board member, I just sort of I think, okay, you're focused on, sounds like at least recently with teachers, and you, Cindy, with parents. But does it feel to you confusing, or will this be part of the task force? Maybe this is sort of a dual question of roles. I'll add a suggestion I thought was very smart that was brought to my attention was, if an incident like this happens, like the chat room incident, that there's like a task force or for lack of a better word, SWAT team that comes in of different community groups and law enforcement, so that these roles can be defined very quickly in the moment. And I thought that was a smart recommendation, and maybe that's happening. So I just want to sort of broadly give you a chance to speak to, as leaders in the community, do you have ideas about further clarifying roles? Do you feel as though things are fairly set? Any suggestions that you have? Thanks.
I'd probably say yes and. So
yes.
I think, a lot of our organizations work together throughout the year, whether there's, something specific happening or not, and I think we have a very good understanding of, where each organization has strengths. We're certainly very clear with, where AHA and What is Love and some of these other organizations do. Many of us serve on the Mental Health Wellness Coalition, and we're in that kind of body really articulating what it is that each of us brings to the table. I think between ADL and Just Communities, we're very clear about kind of where we each have strengths and where we each focus our work. I think one of the big questions still is, is the school district really aware of where each organization has its expertise, and then how to activate that? I think that's, part of, I think this task force that will be going forward will really be able to articulate that and make sure that, that everybody in the community understands the differences between our organizations. I think we often do, but oftentimes in the community, there's still a lot of confusion about that. But this, I think, will give us a chance to articulate those differences.
I think also it's been an opportunity. We're next door neighbors with Just Communities, and there's always a confusion that we do the same things, and I think it's given us the opportunity to clarify what we do differently, which has been really helpful. And I think with the task force, we'll be able to look at all the community organizations and figure out what the appropriate response is to the different situations, because there are some situations that I think AHA would be fabulous for, and there are others that I think Just Communities and ADL are going to be able to respond better. I don't know much about What is Love. It sounds like a great organization, though. But I think I think this will give us an opportunity to clarify. We have so many wonderful nonprofits in this town, and so many wonderful nonprofits that do so many different things, and it will be helpful to have that clarification.
Ms. Parker?
I wanted to say thank you also, and also I appreciate that we will be talking about the task force at our next meeting on March 13th. We obviously stated as a board, and we have members of the community that want to be ensure absolutely that we're moving forward, and so I look forward to seeing it laid out on the 13th.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
I just want to say, again, just echo everyone's comments, how grateful I am for the work that ADL and Just Community does. And it's really important, to be able to create those spaces for healing and education, especially after what recently happened, and not just here locally, but, again, what's happened since I was a senior in high school with Columbine. And it's really important. As I was preparing for the agenda, or as I was preparing for today's meeting, I was looking through the LCAP looking at goal number 2, and it really struck me. The wording says, creating a sense of safety and connectedness, and at the same time catering to the needs of our students in a holistic manner, which I think is super, super important. It's with that in mind that I would hope that the task force would look at creating connectedness, creating safety and climate in a more holistic fashion. I think it's great to have, communication plans, to have health and wellness services, et cetera, there. Health and wellness, I think, is a really big piece in prevention, but I want to make sure that we're looking at other prevention pieces as well. Surprise, surprise, I'm into gender studies and ethnic studies, yay. And I think that's a curriculum that is super, super important to be able to embed into our curriculum as early as possible, because it really does create that the opportunity for relationship, for connectedness, for sympathy, and for empathy in our students, so that hopefully we can reduce such situations as we previously had in San Marcos, or the kind of situations that we had in Florida or other situations. I think starting young, starting early, being able to really getting our young people to appreciate each other as much as they appreciate themselves is a huge, huge, huge piece. Again, the SRO question is fantastic, and I've got more comments on that at a later point. But I think, really looking at how do we embed that appreciation early on is something that they should look at. I would be really disappointed to see if we only went so far as, what are we going to do for next time? What do our safety plans look like? But didn't look at the prevention pieces as early as possible.
Would it be appropriate to respond to one piece of the comment? So, the kinds of discussion that took place that the two teachers referenced are really the kinds of discussions that often happen through a gender and ethnic studies type of curriculum, where not only was empathy built, but where there's a really academically rigorous type of discussion where students are making connections between real-world issues, problems, and challenges, as well as what they're facing in everyday life. And to me, it really does show that students are thirsting for this type of opportunity in their curriculum, and that teachers are really rewarded when they're able to bring that type of curriculum to bear. So, just want to add that.
And again, as you mentioned, the teachers as well, creating these curriculums, having them learn these curriculums, training them and teaching these curriculums also creates that connectedness and that empathy for the staff and for the faculty when dealing with our students. So hopefully, there won't be as much need for implicit bias training down the line. And again, it's about creating connection with our schools, not a set of buildings made of concrete and bricks that have been sitting there for 100 years. That's fantastic. But creating connection with the students, creating connection with the community, with the people who inhabit that district and who make that school not just a place of education, but a place of sanctuary for our students, a place of growth, a place of learning who you are as a person. I think that's a big piece, and again, I really hope that our task force will take the time to look at that. I know we're looking at it in our graduation requirements committee, but I think that's only really one piece, and I'm more interested in what's going to help our children than what is going to check off a box on some assembly bill or student or Senate bill that may be coming down the line or not.
I think he said it all right there. Don't need to repeat it. Thank you. Thank you both.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to the report regarding our local control and accountability plan. Dr. Ramirez.
Sorry, good evening, Board. Dr. Reed, Board President Reed. Yes, LCAP. So I know it's been a challenging, trying time for all of us in the community for the past few months, but we wanted to really take this opportunity to do two things. Understanding that the first time that you probably were oriented officially on the LCAP was your first time through, and it was very timely because it was the launch of a redesign. We hope that it's the last for a couple of years at least, which will allow us to focus on delivering on the plan rather than simply writing it. But it is for sure a better iteration of things that I've done in the past and a better forward-facing document to the community about our intentions, about the actions and ultimately the resources that underlie those actions and goals. So what you have here, and Ms. Carey is my partner on this, but what we wanted to do was really take this also as an opportunity to orient you around the information that's going to go out to the community. Annually, we engage at the school level, at the district level, on a series of opportunities, capitalizing on standing committees that are already in our schools, that are already in our district. District level committees like our DLAC and our LCAP Parent Advisory Committee, which has been a part of our district culture for the last, well, really since the inception of LCAP. And every year we've been trying to refine it. And at the school level, we are looking at school site councils, PTAs, PTOs, foundations, our bargaining units, our teachers, our classified staff. So this is really a collective effort, capitalizing, again, on captive audiences, but also moving forward and reaching out to a broader community. So what you see here is a way of assimilating very complex information that is, for you as a board member, simply a reminder, but is a good visual cue for all of us and for the community that might be watching. So the first part actually is just a recap of LCFF. Now, this will change for us as we transition to being community funded, but I know that the next couple of years will be this LCFF will still be very much a part of our system. So again, this is a reminder just of the LCAP cycle. It's now a 3-year cycle, fixed. So in reality, this isn't just a 1-year plan. It's a 3-year plan with annual updates. So that might seem very intuitive, and Ms. Parker in particular has seen this in the past, but in prior iterations, it was a rolling enrollment, which meant that a rolling plan, which means that every year you would essentially restart a new 3-year plan. This just seems better. It's just a better approach. But we wanted to maintain the work that we had undertaken in outreach to the community and in seeking input from the community. And we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation, because there are a couple of exhibits that I think are important for you to see, for the public to see, and for you to also weigh in on. Next is just a reiteration of the 8 state priorities and how they crosswalk and map to the 5 goals that we have stated in our LCAP. So as you see in Goal 1, cultural proficiency and equity. Goal 2, and you see the priorities that are highlighted. Goal 2, engaging students and families. Goal 3, preparing students for life learning and work. Goal 4, around 21st century learning environments. And 5, early childhood education. So the idea with this is not that it is an all-consuming plan, but it is a comprehensive enough plan to signal both core mission, values, as well as, again, those initiatives that are important in addressing equity gaps. So what you see here is the annual update and needs assessment. That actually coincides with the first part. It's where we are now. Now, in fairness, we had every intention of starting this process about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but things being what they've been, we felt it was more timely to let us get back into some measure of normalcy before launching into some reflective work with our community. We're also using this next LCAP cycle to begin to educate ourselves, our community, around the California dashboard. In a moment, we'll turn our attention to a crosswalk, which I think will be really helpful for you, particularly those of you who have recollections of all of the metrics that we had. There's a good, simple tool that Dr. Guillermo Juan has created that crosswalks our goals, metrics, and separates those that are reflected in the dashboard as well as those that we will continue to carry locally. So it's a really good tool and really concise. But in this case, here is one slide that, and this is a screenshot of the page that signals our achievement and where we are in terms of the California dashboard. So the greatest progress that we see, or at least one of them, is around graduation rates. And you've heard the term Harvey balls, so those are what measure our progress, and they're pretty intuitive. Wherever you see red, those are areas, red or orange, but particularly red, those are areas that really need strong attention, that need something different. Wherever you see green, that tells us that those are areas that we can certainly take pride in, but and continue to look to as far as what we can, where our efforts have shown the greatest progress. In English learner progress, that isn't signaled here, but I know we've undertaken a lot of work around English learners, particularly in the area of reclassification. One reminder, our entire reclassification criteria was always deemed to be interim. Because the landscape is definitely shifting. There are different assessment types, and we will be reevaluating that at another time. But if you notice the graduation rate, and you look at the status, that's something definitely to celebrate, because I know a lot of work has gone into that, not just over the last few years, but really longer than that. In terms of the equity report, this is one expression, one view of that. What you'll see is that we'll have a lot of work to do in the area of suspension rates. You'll see that called out differently in the next slide, but also in terms of achievement, according to our standardized assessments, CASP, in the areas of ELA and math. We are onboarding this year a new language assessment around LPAC and a California science test. So that's to come. Here's where I'd like to spend a little bit of time, because this is really where we would most likely need to dedicate our time and energy. This is a view of a student group report that is really intended to elevate and compare groups one to the other in common areas around achievement. So I'll give you an opportunity just to look through this, but you've heard Mr. Matsuoka mention that the county we've partnered recently with the County Office of Ed, and that is because of the performance of our students with special needs. And those are, there are at least 2 areas indicated as red. So if you look in that column, it's called out, they're about middle of the page, students with disabilities, where you see some fairly dramatic gaps in performance and in a number of areas. But it's not exclusive to our students with special needs. I'd like to make that point. In addition to that, our students with special needs are also reflected and counted in other student groups here on the page as well, including, and as you see, the performance for our students deemed to be socially disadvantaged from low-income families, our English learners, and our Hispanic Latino students. I'll show some significant disproportionality in achievement relative to other groups, as well as our African American students. And the column on the left is the state indicators where specifically we see that we need perhaps the greatest improvement or growth. And around, again, the areas of suspension rate, you'll see why graduation rate is called out. It's not so much for the aggregate, but rather the student group performance, as well as, again, standardized assessments as measured through CASP in ELA and in math. Here's also where I think Ms. Carey can shed a lot of her expertise and background. But what you see here is a relatively, it's not necessarily new, but it can be a little nuanced. It can be actually very nuanced, which is indicators around college and career. The one that I would like to call out, because it's important for us to weigh one with the other, You saw the graduation rate, which is measured by cohort, is at 92.5. But our performance overall, in terms of college and career indicator, is at about 50%. So how we reconcile that, and then in relation to the other groups is important. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Carey.
So the college career indicator is something that was much anticipated. We got it. You get this data in arrears. You know, we first saw it in the fall and have been making sense of it since then. Dr. Ramirez has already pointed out the sort of obvious discrepancy between this, you know, worthy of celebrating graduation rate and yet the disconnect between that graduation rate and the college and career readiness rate. The thing I'll spend a little bit of time on tonight is just educating you and the community about what comprises, you know, how we determine college career readiness for students. There's 9 different ways that students can show that, and we can even disaggregate for our own students the proportionality, you know, what students achieved college career readiness through method A versus method B versus method C. But those methods include not just completion of coursework, as we typically associate with graduating or earning a high school diploma, but specifically completing A through G coursework, and also potentially the successful meeting standards on CASP, and or successful completion of a CTE pathway. So there are multiple measures by which a student, and multiple combinations through which a student might be able to demonstrate college and career readiness. And that's the exciting part for us, because it gives us some opportunities that are not just narrow ones to define what it means to be college and career ready. We only have that disaggregated or that sort of comparison bar for all students. It just got a little crowded to do that for all groups, but there are discrepancies for all student groups when it comes to grad rate versus college career readiness rate. I will highlight those students with disabilities, because we've been spending a lot of time, Dr. Wagenick in particular, and myself on this topic. And for that particular subgroup, the discrepancy between grad rate and college career readiness rate is not 42.5 percentage points like you see for all students, but more like 70 percentage points. So you'd see about an 80% grad rate for students with disabilities, and yet a 9.2% college career readiness rate for students with disabilities. So just yet another metric that compels our attention when it comes to students with disabilities in our district.
So in terms of a timeline, this is one view of it. The board memo indicates a timeline with more detail. But broadly, we are conducting our annual update and needs assessment really this month. We've started really in January. And we'll talk a little bit about a survey that is one component of our needs assessment. Our community engagement and consultation, that will include, again, those meetings and input gathering sessions with some of our standing committees at the school level, at the district level, but also at community. We formulated our community meetings as well. And finally, a revision, an updated draft, if you will, which will appear a little different in that what you see in our current plan under goals, actions, and services will essentially then be the starting point for our annual update. And finally concluding with public hearing and board adoption concurrent with our adopted budget in June. So that's the general time frame that we're looking at for the next few months, in fact. So with that, I'd actually, just to end, what you see on the left is a reiteration of those goals, and then questions that we wanted to just frame our discussion. One of the things that, and you see the links there, those links actually went live last week, late last week. They were published to our internal stakeholders, and are being made available to the public as well, and pushed out to our parents and families. So I would like to just turn your attention very briefly to the survey instrument, because there is a point of departure there from what you may have experienced previously, and that was all with an attempt to elicit more precise and focused feedback from community stakeholders, internal and external.
You want to just punch up the survey? That'll take you to the live link, I think. There's a PDF.
So this is a PDF version, you'll see the live link, but just what we're trying to also elicit is more information. These aren't forced responses, so people can certainly be anonymous if they so decide, but all of the questions constructed were couched around those 5 goals. Again, an effort to begin to become more pointed about the feedback that we get and use it also as an opportunity to further educate and publicize the shift into the dashboard. So we won't go through all of them, but here is what people would encounter, and this is just, again, the print version. But if you continue to just scroll through, you see opinions and thoughts around degree of impact, from large to no impact, and then of course the I don't know for individuals that may not be oriented that way, or an elementary parent that may not know about secondary, things of that nature. The other thing to consider with this is capitalizing on this cycle. It's going to be really important. You know, our outcome results are indicating trend lines, and the trend lines are actually stagnant in some ways. So the question that we really need to ponder at this moment, now several years into our LCAP cycle, is what do we need to do differently? How do we need to orient ourselves differently? How do we need to use our resources differently? Because we've been at this now for a few years, and while the template has shifted and morphed over the last couple of years, always for the better, the work has been consistent for the last few. So how do we capitalize on the things that we know are effective, but also begin to look differently and question the things that may not be nearly as effective? So that's really the question that we'll begin to ponder over the next coming months, that you'll probably hear about, that should be also very, very much at the center of the SPSA discussion that will happen here in May. When you see those, and you'll see hopefully some strong alignment and patterns, one from the other. The last one that I just wanted to show very quickly is Exhibit A, which just gives you a crosswalk of metrics versus that one there. So this gives you the LCAP goal, the state priority that it covers, the metric, and the reporting mechanisms. Just to call out the distinction between metric and reporting mechanisms, those metrics are things that are very familiar to you. They were part of a more extensive report. That was always, in part, a placeholder for what was to come, which was the dashboard, because that would be the way to visualize that information and data. So some of it is stored there, and it gives you an idea of where, but others are locally held. And I'll give you an example. If you scroll to the bottom, around early childhood, the KSEP is a local assessment. And it's not an assessment tool, a traditional assessment tool. It's a profile that is based on observational data as well. and that provides us, to use Mr. Paredes or yours words, a more holistic view of children entering our kindergarten classrooms. So that's one indication of a local tool that has great value to us that wouldn't appear on the dashboard, but nevertheless is an important metric for us. So with that, I'd like to just turn it over to you for any kinds of questions, feedback, or commentary you may be able to provide our team.
Any comments, questions? Ms. Parker?
Just great work, and keep it up. And it's starting to kind of make more sense. And so and that's not a reflection on this district at all. It's completely, the state's figuring this out over time. So I'm kind of excited about where this is going. So thank you.
Yeah, I like the reference of crosswalks, and we've got dashboards and crosswalks, and it's all making sense. It's coming together. I did want to ask if one of the stagnant places was relational to the actual parent engagement. I mean, has there been a lack, or have there been less parents populating these meetings? I think in the beginning, there was probably a fresh, exciting, so I'm wondering how has that been sustainable? Has that been consistent?
There has been, I would say, a decline, certainly from what Ms. Parker, I think, would have experienced when LCAP first became, when we moved as a state toward LCFF and the LCAP that accompanied it. I don't know that the enthusiasm has so much waned. The participation at the community meetings is something we've talked about and we want to revisit and do differently. I do know that the fact that schools have stepped into that space, I think it shouldn't be viewed as an absolutely as a deficit necessarily, but rather there are more avenues for parents to get information. But it's certainly something that we want to work on. To go back to Ms. Parker's point about things becoming better, one of the things that has been lacking is an executive summary. And we do have some ideas. In fact, it's a bit premature, but there are some ways in which we think we're going to be better positioned to provide an executive summary, something that just becomes a bit more accessible, even though the document lays out better to a parent that is not an educator or in the educational system. It does become a challenge. But to answer your question directly, parent engagement has looked different, and some of the work has also been of creating more of a captive audience and an ongoing input. So even though it's not expressly cited here, groups like DLAC or at the school levels, school site councils and ELACs have become stronger since LCAP first came to our district. And therefore, there are also additional avenues for parents to provide input or community to provide input.
Thank you.
I just had one more comment.
Yeah,
so thank you. I want to say thank you as well as beginning to make sense. I can LCAP and say what that means, and LCFF, I know what that means, so that's good. I did have a question on, it's on slide 10, I think. Just in terms of our underrepresented students, and I know you had reported earlier there had been some challenges with outreach to parents, and I'm just wondering what you're doing to better engage parents in that outreach effort, because it seems like those same few numbers are correlating with the percentage of not reaching that college career and college and career ready. And because and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but if there's, because we're asterisking and saying there's fewer than 11 students, so for privacy we don't want to do that. But I'm saying it's 11 students, so how can we get that to green and blue?
So on the achievement side, certainly our instructional practices need to shift. Where there's been discussions of cultural proficiency, of implicit bias, those are intended to really change mindsets to make it more culturally responsive, to make the curriculum more culturally responsive, so that students see themselves as part of the curriculum, see their experiences validated, and so that we can see what they bring to the classroom or to the school, for that matter, from a place of assets and not deficits. What I often like to say is, just because a student may read at a different grade level doesn't mean they think that way. And how to find avenues to bring that and build from there is important. Do parents play a part in that? Absolutely. Does outreach to community, and particularly communities of color, matter? Absolutely. So we will be more intentional about those approaches. Our PIO is phenomenal. Ms. Lauren is phenomenal at being able to help us create something more comprehensive. But we will certainly commit ourselves to being more intentional. We can't pretend that I have all the answers, so if anybody from the board would like to offer something that we might want to consider, we would certainly welcome that. But the emphasis on the classroom, on the curriculum, on things that students encounter every day are not just issues of school climate. They really are issues of how students learn and how they ultimately feel connected or appreciated within a school setting. And we have ample evidence that would suggest to us that we can improve upon those areas, particularly with some of our students of color.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, and I think certainly we don't have all the answers, and the more that we're informed by those communities, those parents, and all across those students that are underrepresented with regards to it, but I think it's important to keep it up front, to keep it, because so easily when the numbers are small to get forgotten or pushed aside. So I think with regards to that is to keep it up front, and therefore it keeps it in perspective and keeps it as a priority. So thank you for doing that as well.
Can I interject one thing? I don't know if the board is aware, but there are plans already underfoot to have during this spring 2 very special versions of the Talking in Class program. I don't know if you're aware of those. One of those is actually specific to African American students and the experience of African American students in our district. So that will involve participants from all 4 of the high schools. It's going to be hosted by City College in conjunction with faculty members there. So I know you'll get invitations to come to attend the presentations that are the culminations of that workshop series, but it's right in the spirit of what you're talking about in terms of what we want to shine the light on and what voices we want to be engaging and listening to.
And I appreciate that as well. You know, I want to talk about beyond, and certainly looking at the African American experience, because I had a son who was in those small classes, and so it's important that. But I also just want to say that it's important for all of our students to come to, not just one specific community, but all of our students that are underrepresented in those smaller numbers. How do we do that, engage? And more importantly, how do you feel you feel invited? So yes, we're going to have the community meetings, but does someone coming, do they feel invited, and do they feel like they're wanted to be there? Not just something that, here's what we need to do, but are we, really looking at it from the holistic, view? When they get there, do you feel invited in terms of that? And I also think it's important with regards to our students that are biracial. That's a crucial piece too, that sometimes is also missed, but it's a matter about when we get there and you're invited to that table, do you feel invited with regards to that? So thank you.
Yeah, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, so I'm not going to go on and on right now. It's late. But I will just say that, the idea of making inclusive curriculum across all populations, so not to say just, but cultural relevant pedagogy, but also looking at persons with disabilities. So how can we ensure that it's inclusive across all students? And that comprehensive approach needs to start from elementary and go all the way up through high school. So I know that you're working on that, and that's another conversation. But thank you very much for your hard work in this area and for making it so that we can pretty much understand it for today.
Thank you. More conversations to come. Thank you.
All right. So we will move on to an update on the State of California Accountability System, the dashboard. Mr. Matsuoka.
So we'll do a sort of a broad skim through the narrative. I did not build a slide deck because I actually want to do it live on the CDE website. It's just the complexity of this, and now that our understandings, my understandings, has just really gotten sharpened. It's fun. I would say it's gratifying to watch all of us go, oh, the light bulbs are starting to click. This accountability system, LCAP, and now this dashboard is really starting to settle in for us. So I wrote this narrative. It's really divided into 2 halves. It's an overview of a deeper look at the accountability system and this idea of distance from 3, that now that I understand it, I think it is almost the pivotal part of the accountability system. I mean, the dashboard made so much more sense, all the colors, once I understood distance from 3. And what led to sort of my deeper learnings was when we received the letter from Dr. Oh, she's not a doctor yet. She soon will be Dr. Susan Salcido, County Superintendent. And
She is.
oh, she is. She got it.
Finished.
Oh, she just finished.
Yeah.
Wow.
All over Facebook. Where were you? Not on Facebook.
Not on Facebook. I will. Next time I will honor her as Dr. Salcido. That's great. But the technical assistance that we are receiving from SB CEO, it really is highlighted now in our special ed population and their distance from 3 as a cohort group. So we'll take a look at the 2 halves. And this isn't part of the report, but here's my observations now of the whole accountability system. I was sitting in our county soups meeting, and we're all starting to grapple with our special education students are being identified from a data standpoint in a way that we've never had as a state. I mean, we've all known that there are challenges with outcomes, but because it's now part of a student group and a dashboard, I mean, we used to get an API for students with disabilities, but I think that masked over some of the deeper issues. I mean, to start to wrestle with what does it mean to help our students with disabilities become college and career ready? I mean, we see the gap, and it's, there's some big challenges there, but I think we have to redefine what does it mean to help our students with special needs be ready for the 21st century in a way that's adaptable to them. And I think the state's got a big model. Even though it's creating work, I appreciate the spotlight that it's showing on all of our groups. I mean, we need to do a dive into our English language learners someday. But today, let's take a look at the dashboard. It actually kind of complements Dr. Ramirez's report about LCAP development and now the accountability system. So, Brian, let's do this. Why don't you kick yourself off, and I'll take over the screen. Oh, we're in the boardroom, not the design room. That's where I live all day, a little conference room. I would encourage the board to have the narrative up because I may make references to some of the words and the numbers there. Okay, so I'm going to take you now. I've already preloaded these screenshots. So in the narrative, we did provide a pathway to get there. It's data quest. It takes some kind of poking around to get there. If you ever want some technical assistance about how to navigate data quest, I probably go there 3 times a week as superintendent because there's some really important information in there for all districts. This is now, I've got 2 dashboards preloaded. This one's ELA, grades 3 through 8, and the next one over, identical, but for mathematics. So let's just take a look at the ELA. So this is district-wide. And the first thing you always want to look for every year is where is Santa Barbara unified in this 5x5 grid? And we literally landed in the middle. All right, see, Santa Barbara unified. So we want to move from yellow to green. We want to be in the green. We don't want to be in the yellow. Ideally, we'd want to be in the blue. That's a long road ahead. So that's our placement as a district. And then this look has every school on the same dashboard look. And so you can see where our schools land. And, you know, we've got to just really support Cleveland a lot. They have a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. You can see the schools that are orange. We have yellows. And we don't have too many schools in green. And we've got 2 in blue. All right, so to get the board oriented, I know you've heard this before. We've presented it several times. The vertical column is the level of achievement. That's just your raw, like, how did you score? And then left to right is the growth factor year to year. So you could be, you know, down in the yellow to orange, but if you just look at that orange row, it's possible you can see our 3 schools that have made it to the yellow, which is better than orange, because they grew. And they grew by at least 3 to a 15-point range. So here's that whole design of the accountability system. Before, it was just one number, API, raw score, get to 800, that's the goal. Now this system is modeling growth, which I appreciate because, you know, with some populations, you got poverty and English language learners, you know, if they show growth of 15 points, that's huge. So I appreciate a system that's going to reward growth. Now, you do have to eventually start moving up in just raw achievement, okay? But I like that we can go left to right year to year. All right, so there are a couple of links that get you to some more interesting data. I actually didn't want to try to capture this. All right, so now there was a link, view by student groups. So now it's the same grid by our key groups. And we just, you know, we talked about, so where are students with the disabilities? Well, they're in the red column, and we're going to see why did they end up red. But you can see English learners, African American, homeless, you know, we just, a lot of our groups are down in the orange. So we have work to do. We have work to do across all of these groups. Notice that all students, as a district, we've placed in the middle again. I mean, that reflects the first view. And our 2 large, well, our large group, our white students are in the blue, and our Asian students are in the green. This is ELA grades 3 through 8. Okay, now what happened to grade 11? That's in the college career readiness system. So that's kind of moved into that whole other part. And so this is all of our junior highs, and it's our elementary schools. All right, and I know what you're thinking. So, okay, so how do our partner districts fare? Well, we'd have to actually take a look at their dashboards because we receive their kids. And trust me, there's a whole data analytic that I would love to do, like what are the patterns as our partner district students arrive into our junior highs? And, you know, what's going on there? There's a lot of data to make sense of. All right, now where this got really helpful is there's this tab called View Detailed Data. So I'm going to actually, we'll stay on this one. I want to go back to the school look, but these are our subgroups. And now this column called average distance from 3. Average distance from 3. Let me just take you out to, oh, that's so small. So where does this idea of 3 come from? It is literally the dividing point. It's the lowest possible score in the achievement scale standard met. So for ELA grade 3, the distance from 3 is the number 2432. If you get to 2432 as a third grader, you have met standards, you're good, your personal score is good, and you're helping your school score and your district score. So if you're left of that number, you're in standard nearly met. If you're way left of that number, you're in the standard not met. And if you score really well, you get into standard exceeded. I just did some math. I was curious. That whole range for third grade is it's 509 points wide. I never knew this. Where is distance from 3? You would think it's in the middle of that range, 509. It's actually there's 318 scale points to the left of 3, and there's 191 scale points to the right of 3. Okay, so there's some research that I need to educate about. Wow, they even put the standard towards the right on this entire scale score range. So that's an interesting psychometric question that I'm sure CDE has thought about, wrestled with. But I've been looking at this grid now for about 3 months. I just assumed 3 was sort of middle. It's actually not middle in the scale score range, which goes to the rigor of the CASP system, the rigor of Common Core. I mean, the standards are raised for all of our students. So that's where this idea of distance from 3 is literally that left-hand number in the standard met column. You get to that number, you've helped yourself, your school, your district. So, why did our students with disabilities end up in the red? Their cohort distance from 3 in ELA is minus 100.9. That's far away from 3. Far away. And the year-to-year experience of change was negative 9.5. So not only are they doing, they're performing at a tough scaled score level, but they went backwards last year, year-to-year comparison. And so now, this led to all kinds of other, my eyes just went up and down all of our groups. Next one I looked at is our English language learners, which are near the top. How far is that group distance from 3? Minus 44.5. Okay, at least we're within range. But our growth last year was negative 3.4. So what I've realized in the last 6 weeks, okay, this really is one of the anchor points of this accountability system, because if you go back to this, all right, I'm going to go, I'll stay focused. Here's what we realized with our students with disabilities. All right, so they're minus 100 points away from 3. So to get up to yellow, we'd have to grow 100 points for our cohort of special ed students. Okay, that's a lot of work. I'm just going to make that statement. But can we get growth? Absolutely. Okay, this was sort of the aha moment. What would it take for our special ed cohort to get from red to orange? If our entire group of special ed students increased by 3 points as a cohort, we move into the orange column. All right? Why are we in this column? Because that cohort went backwards by, 9 points? So that's why they're not even in the middle red box, they're left of that. So here's what we have said to our leadership team. We shared it with TLAC as we made sense of it. Okay, trying to close a gap of 100 points, that's not the right goal. Can we get growth of 5 points next year? Yes, we can do that. All right, if we can get from negative 100 to negative 95, we click to orange. Okay, but here's what I learned yesterday when I was looking at the slide deck from the county. We have to do this in both ELA and math so that we don't stay in, I would say, red, orange, or red, red 2 years in a row. So the accountability system is going to start increasing. So this is like the first year of, okay, you need help. We're here to help. Everybody's being really helpful about it. But the next year of accountability, as the state starts, there's going to be okay, now you need serious help. Now here's some harder accountability steps. And I just as soon not experience that as a school district. All right, I think we can get there. So, makes sense? Distance from 3 is it's like our new metric. Okay, while we're on this, I'm just going to go take a glimpse. All right, so here's our, oh no, I don't want school groups. Oh, no, these are schools, all right. So just a glimpse, view detailed data, and then we're going to leave this dashboard. So here's the look of our individual schools in ELA, distance from 3, and change. And we actually haven't built a report for you, but you're seeing it. I mean, everybody can go onto the DataQuest website. There's a lot of rich data about our schools, ups and downs to make sense of. I mean, what caught my eye, the change, like, you know, we always want growth. We want positive numbers, not negative numbers. And we have a mix. We have positive numbers, and we have some negative ones. So, not to call out any schools, because that wasn't the intent of this, but there's some rich data for us to make sense of in this, okay? You can see how this accountability system actually has a lot of really important tools to focus our instructional practices. You know, we can't just throw practices out there. We've got to be strategic and intentional about what are we doing and what are the metrics, and now we can monitor this on an annual basis. So this, you know, the system has been there, but honestly, I think this distance from 3, I think CDE has been updated and sharpening their framework every 3 months, and so now it's coming into really clear view. All right, so then if we go back, Brian, I'll just go back to the document. So now that you have understood that, what we decided to do was take an analysis of our special ed students by disability. And so it's in that report. And one of the really important things is, so what is the highest disability groups in our district? And you can see the ones that are yellow. It's other health impaired and specific learning disability. So what we've tasked our principals and then our special ed team is to really focus on those 2 disabilities. I mean, we need to pay attention to every student, but if we're trying to get that growth, you know, of 3 points or more, we've got to take a look at those 2 large groups. And so that's what we've presented as our marching orders to our broad team, our principals, TLAC. Some of our schools have started hearing about the accountability system through their principals. I would say that we've spread that out sort of, I don't know, I'd have to check in with Ms. Carey and Dr. Ramirez about what school staffs have heard this, but to solve the special ed needs, it's not just the special ed teachers. It's our gen ed teachers who are, you know, stepping into co-teaching models or supporting special ed students in mainstream classrooms. You know, the days of, well, that's a special ed department issue, I hope those days left us 10 years ago. But I think we still have some cultural practices where we need to attend to that. So that was a blend of dashboard. It was distance from 3. It was really bringing an update about the work around special ed students. We are working closely with Dr. Ellen Barger from SBCEO, and we will be working with her in the next, I think, 6 weeks. She has to hear from us what we're doing, and then she'll write a summary report to myself and present it to the board sometime later this spring. So that was a lot of ground. Any questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you, and I can actually appreciate it and understand and feel like with a little bit more education and then looking and working in it, to explain it, to really talk it through. Here's what it is, and it seems very intuitive in terms of that, like, oh, we need this to get there, to do this, and here are how the things or the strategies that we're using to get there. So for me, it began to really make a little bit more sense and something intuitive that you could actually talk about in plain English, so to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to say where you landed with the co-teaching model is really where we're going, where we need to be going, and where I know that you had a recent training on that, and I know that Antioch also offered a training, a co-teaching model, but I think to be able to bring together and collaborate and support each other, not just, oh, you take care of the special ed students and I'll do this, but really what does that look like is a big undertaking, but I think it really leads to the goals that you're seeking.
And because we have a data team second to none in our district, I mean, between Brian Rouse and Chelsea Guillermo, I mean, they really are the dream team of data analytics. We could actually now start to look at what has been the impact of co-teaching on the distance from 3 and the change year to year. I mean, we've got the raw data. We just, we have to find time to do all of those micro-analyses. But it's important for our team to know, so what has been the impact of co-teaching, and look at the differences in outcomes for students. And because it's, it's a lot of work to implement that model. But if the results show a different experience for students, then it just helps everybody embrace that model.
Thank you. So we are going to move on to Open Alternative School Update Task Force. Mr. Matsuoka.
And Brian, I took myself off so you can put yourself back up. Yes, it's a short report response to the board's request for an update about the redesign of a model to replace OAS. So I'll comment about that. And then we thought we should include a report about where we're at with the placement of all of our current OAS families. So I met with Dr. Marianne Caston. I'll skip her first part. Demedio Caston. Who really has been involved with OAS for decades. And I mean, she's an expert in school models and design. So we had a really great conversation. It was going to happen right before Christmas break, and then that got disrupted. So we finally met sometime late January, I believe, maybe early February. She is really excited to be part of this team, and she's also very open to where we go. She's not wedded to a model, but she has a lot of experience with all the theories and practices of holistic teaching and learning. So she's certainly going to be part of our team. We were headed towards a move to Monroe, as part of the conversations. I've been talking with Brian Naughton, honestly, for probably 4 months about it. And I have a meeting with a small design team from his school. I think it's next week. My opinion is we should do a whole school design instead of a program underneath a school. My reasons for that is based on my conversations with the Monroe staff. When I presented, we want to develop this cool model that's highly relational and whole child, and you heard my comments. It's like, well, that's what we do. That's who we are. And I think we have to have a whole school embrace some kind of model. Because if it's like 2 or 3 classrooms, the challenges from enrollment, from, selecting that program, I think that's where we get into challenges with programs of choice. And so Monroe is, the question that I have to Brian and eventually to his whole staff is, are you ready to engage in a look at a school redesign of your whole school around a whole child framework? And so he's ready. I'm going to meet with his smaller design team. Eventually we need to presented to his entire staff. They can't be surprised. We can't design the school, off in a room without involving them. I believe that there's other experts out there that we should tap into. So we are going to, we'll keep searching and trying to find the right, it's really designers to think about a school model that's whole child, but also helping kids get ready for 21st century learning. So that's an update. And then the data about enrollments, Mr. Rouse, if you could scroll down. I think we've got answers from, is it 32 out of 62 families? And I had Ms. Wagenick send out an email query to the 30 families, like, what's your status? Do you need any support from us? How can we be helpful? It was our experience at the community meeting that we held back in January. And I mentioned this in the report. A lot of the Goleta residents have gone to visit their Goleta Union schools, and they were actually, they were quietly surprised at the quality of their neighborhood schools. I think they just hadn't visited them for a long time. And so my sense is that a lot of the Goleta families are headed back to Goleta Union. So we'll keep, supporting any family that needs help. The two, waitings, it's a space issue. But, we're staying in touch with those parents. But to have 32 requests and be able to place 30 at their school of choice, I thought was a great outcome. Okay. Questions or comments?
I just have to say that I appreciate that, and I appreciate, first of all, the idea of redesigning a whole school is, I think, amazing and exciting, and I think a wonderful opportunity to marry all of those different concepts and frameworks together that are really going to push us forward to 21st century learning and can be gleaned by other schools in the district. Also, I appreciate the reaching out again to the parents and just sending that message out, Dr. Wagner. I appreciate that because I think, I know that they were challenged at the time, and I think they still are different levels, but the fact that you've reached out, and so my question to you is, if they still have concerns, what would be the best approach for parents? Should they contact you directly?
Yes, I sent the second email out with the follow-up on Friday afternoon. I heard back from one parent who actually was very happy and had gone to her homeschool, which was Roosevelt. But I think for any others, and I put this in the email, contact me, and I will talk by phone, email, in person. We can set that up based on what their preference is. We want to work with these families, so we just need them to let us know if they need the help.
All right, well, thank you. And I know that from the parents that I've spoken with, that they appreciate that you reached out and that they have a voice, a person they can talk to. So thank you both. Okay, moving on. Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Sunshine initial proposal to negotiate with Santa Barbara Unified School District, successor agreement for implementation in the 2018-19 school year. Mr. Matsuoka.
So we received their official sunshine to now negotiate wages and compensation. Notice co-teaching is on the list because that's been an area of conversation and problem solving. I'm kind of curious what they're going to bring about TLAC. It's been in place now for 2 years, but I'm sure now their team has, I don't know, questions or ideas to talk about. And then I'm intrigued about safety. I can imagine what topics might be, but we'll meet with them and see what their concerns are. And so that's their sunshine. And then to jump to the parallel, I mean, we have sunshined in response with, the same salary and benefits. And then when we get to the other document, Mr. Rouse, I'm moving on to the next item. And then we'll take any questions on both directions. We did put calendar because I do want to get the 1920 calendar approved this spring. So we're not doing this like waiting game. We approved the calendar for 18, 19. Oh, it finally got wrapped up, I think, after the fire flood window. I can't remember. But I want to get that calendar adopted by unions and board approved before we leave for summer. So that we should always be about 15 to 18 months in advance on school calendars. I did want to loop in our partner districts. We actually had a meeting scheduled to review it, and I think that I forget which disaster disrupted that meeting. So I'm at the point, I'm going to email the draft out to them, send comments back, because, you know, our decisions impact our 4 partner districts, and I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to comment. So there's sunshines both ways. Questions or comments?
All right, I think we're good.
Okay.
So we're going to move now to the consent agenda, to the items number 1 and 2, Mr. Matsuoka.
So I just wanted to share, I guess, apologies to the board, because this came up about ratification of a field trip the last board meeting. And gosh darn it, we have another one on this list. I looked at the situation, and I decided to let that trip go forward. That was the trip at Adams, I believe, and it's Astro Camp. You know, they had planned on it. Money was raised, money was donated, so I let them go. And then another one popped in just yesterday that we put onto the agenda, so there's a modification. I forget which school that one was from. Yeah, so what happened is we received it, but it literally landed in our office like pre-Thomas Fire, and it just got lost in the shuffle. So, you know, there have been some circumstances this year. But here's what this is highlighted for us. I walked away from the last board meeting saying, we've got to get a system that's better than paper. And so Ms. Carey's already started jumping on it. She's starting to realize the volume of field trips, the numbers. This is actually a technology system that's just waiting to be figured out, because relying on paper and then somebody making sure it gets processed, come on, we're way past paper. I want to start tracking all of our field trips. I mean, they're fairly predictive. I mean, schools kind of get in routines on field trips, so I think we can get a system built. So it's apologies, and thank you for the board for your graciousness in ratifying another field trip. And just, I wanted to say, we are going to improve our practices on this one.
Ms. Parker?
Well, you're welcome ahead of time, I guess. I appreciated that you reached out to me, especially after our last meeting, and everything is moving in the right direction, and it's super exciting, actually, if this is a catalyst for moving it to a digital system. And so, not to belabor anything at this point, I will move to approve items D1, this approval of student field trips out of state, out of country, and/or overnight, and D2, ratification of approval of student field trips out of state, out of country, and/or overnight.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And it passes unanimously. All right. Do we have any coming events? Ms. Parker?
Yes. So on Wednesday, tomorrow morning, we're moving into a recommended evacuation mode for much of South County. And on Thursday, it's highly likely that we're moving into a mandatory evacuation. And so in terms of coming events, how are we prepping in terms of students being evacuated, staff being evacuated, possibility of one-on-one closure between Thursday and Friday?
All right, yeah. Our PIO has been working hard today. Lauren actually has been listening in on the OES conversations, and she's built a communication plan. Honestly, Cabinet needs to review it, but we need to get word out to our employees and our families about what do we need to do. It looks like they're headed towards an evacuation.
Mm-hmm.
The rainfall predictions are high enough that I think they're not going to risk it. I think they're going to evacuate. So, any other comments?
I don't think your mic is working.
Hello. Oh,
No, that was not on. No, it's on.
it's actually going off and on. So the light comes on and then it turns off.
We're going to get some new microphones for that.
Something.
That whole table back there is challenged.
I am a millennial. I'm going to do what Tom did.
It was working. It's done.
Hello.
Yeah, it's
No,
on.
it's off and on.
So the Santa Barbara Fire Department has a call tomorrow morning, and Santa Barbara County Office of Ed has been participating at the table of the Office of Emergency Services meeting. We understand that the CHP is prepared to participate again with the transportation plan for essential staff, but what that's going to look like, and then is dependent upon the incident. And so I'll be listening in on the call tomorrow morning at 8, or just following up with people if I'm unable to participate on that call. And I'm communicating with Cabinet about the expectations, about the National Weather Service and all the updates associated with that, and we'll get out messaging to staff tomorrow.
I think one have is if even our staff that live in areas that go under mandatory evacuation, even without the closure of the 101, they may not be able to work on Friday or Thursday or Friday. And so I'm wondering, is there a way of putting substitutes on alert that we may have extra need for subs on Thursday and Friday? That's just a question mark for me, if that's even something that's worthwhile to do in terms of making sure that we're ready to pull people in if needed.
Our experience that week after 101 was closed, the first day was a little crazy. The sub pool is, even under good highway conditions, is thin. I mean, the closure affected our sub pool. I mean, what we did is we just redeployed any non-classroom person to cover classrooms. We have TOSAs, we deployed them. It was really an all hands on deck. I mean, so I think we can reactivate those logistics. It's how do we get prepared for this stuff in advance?
So you'll be letting staff and families know by tomorrow at a certain time.
That was the plan.
That what's going to be happening and ways that classrooms would be covered and what to do if you can't get your kid to school and if that's okay, and all those reassuring things that they need to hear.
Well, first it was staff predominantly, and then families. The Cabinet was going to have a discussion about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks for bringing that up, Ms. Parker. Anything else?
I'm just waiting for the next agenda item.
Oh. The next meeting?
Not yet.
Future agenda items. But did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, depending, obviously, weather-related, I was going to be participating in the Dr. Seuss Read Across America at McKinley. So I don't know if others are going to be doing that as well. Of course, it depends on the weather.
Yeah. And I am too, so maybe I'll see you there. Have fun. I'm excited. Okay. Now, future agenda items.
I'm ready. All right. I had two things on my list for future agenda items. One is BPAR and Exhibit 5144, discipline. And Dr. Wagenknecht, I don't know if that is on your radar to have coming back to us soon.
What is it?
So it's the board policy around student discipline. And right now, I know normally in the past, the exhibit has been on the district website, and right now, the exhibit is not on the district website.
So you're talking about the disciplinary guidelines?
Yes.
They are being reworked. I pulled them off because of recent changes to laws. They're incorrect, and so rather than have the incorrect information out in the public, I pulled that down.
Great. So I'm hoping that it can come for board discussion at some point this spring?
It certainly will.
And then the other thing is the commuter train that is starting in April. And I am wondering if we can have, I don't know if it needs to be a board discussion or a board report that we get, if there are ways that we can survey our employees to see how much interest there is in it, and if there are ways that we can really support it. In terms of, do we have a shuttle that comes to take East Side employees here and West Side employees there? I really, really would like to make this work. And anything that we can do to help our staff stay off that crazy 101 that are coming from the south would be fantastic.
And I believe the first month is free or something to that effect. Yes.
Wow. There you go. Now he can actually go home and have dinner because he'd have to catch the train. We have been having conversations about this. It was my observation the first morning of the bus bridge. I said, we got to figure out how to make this a more permanent transportation system, because getting that many people off the highways would help. I mean, 101, I hear from our team who's commuting, it's a really tough commute. I mean, your counter commute, so
I'm watching it going, thank God I am not going the other direction.
And what we learned those mornings is, you know, the almost ad hoc creation of van pools from Sears to schools. I saw it working really quickly. And we've got so many workers commuting both ways up and down. I think there's a way. So we've actually started the conversations. I think we want to reach out to our other public agencies for how do they manage this? You know, what are the guidelines about incentivizing it? Can we incentivize it? But I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage. I would love I would love for Amtrak to realize this is financially viable. Yeah.
All right, well, our next board meeting will be Tuesday, March 13th, 2018, and I think we've had a very full meeting, so I will adjourn now.